Good evening, DSU student body and faculty. This evening we will be presenting the debate for the position of Vice President Student Life. I'm your moderator for this evening, Mark Joycey. Before we get started, here are a few announcements. First and most important, we recognize that we are holding this debate on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq land. Second, we would like to thank the Dalhousie Student Union for allowing us to use this room, as well as the tech people who are allowing this to be live streamed to everybody. Tonight, this debate is about the discussion of ideas and actions that will help make the DSU, and more importantly, the students, have a positive time here at Dalhousie University. Each candidate here is running to help improve the well-being of all students here at Dal. There will be agreement and disagreement here on stage on how to reach these objectives. Candidates will have every right to disagree and argue about ideas and actions, and we encourage healthy debate. We do not encourage attacks on each other or other groups of people in a way that is discriminatory or offensive. Those who attempt to engage in this behavior, including those in the audience as deemed by the moderator, will not be tolerated. In addition, candidates must address the moderator in their responses. Candidates cannot engage in other candidates or members of the audience. Candidates are not to cut off other candidates and must wait for the moderator to address questions to them. Questions will be taken from the audience and read by the moderator. Questions can also be submitted in advance via this online web form. Spokesperson for referendum campaigns can opt to deliver a short speech before the commencement of debates. All candidates are obligated to follow university policy as well as municipal, provincial, and federal laws in the course of campaigning. At the beginning of the event, the expectations of the candidates in the audience need to be reiterated, which is what I'm doing now. So, now on to the debate itself. All candidates will have read the rules in the debate and agreed upon them before participating. Candidates will get 2 minutes max for opening statements. Questions will be asked by myself based on questions I have written or been presented to me. And a question will be asked to one of the candidates. The candidate will get 60 seconds to respond. Every other candidate will get 60 seconds to rebuttal or respond. Then there will be a 5-minute discussion between the candidates on the issues of the questions, as well as maybe follow-up questions by myself. Candidates will be respectful to others speaking during this time. The order of the candidates giving opening statements has been determined at random. Corey, you are first.
Thanks. I'd just like to start by thanking everyone for coming out tonight. It's great to see so many people actively involved in the DSU elections. So my name's Corey. I'm the current Vice President of Student Life, so I am seeking re-election this year. Just some basic information about myself. I'm a fourth-year theater studies major with a minor in psychology. I've been involved with the DSU in some capacity ever since coming to Dal, first serving on my faculty association, the Arts and Social Sciences Society, as faculty rep, and then as Vice President Internal and DSU Counselor for Arts and Social Science, and then with work through OB Committee, Impact Awards, and a whole other stuff that eventually led into the position I currently hold. Aside from that, I guess I'll let my other candidates introduce themselves.
All right. Thank you very much. So now we have Tori.
Hi everyone, my name's Tori White and I'm a 5th-year student in Commerce and International Development Studies. I hail all the way from Toronto. That's a little bit about me. So I'm in a unique position on this election because I've had the opportunity now for 5 years to work in student life in so many facets. And so I've really kind of been able to paint a picture of what student life should look like on campus, and as a result, I've kind of been able to see where those gaps are and how they might be filled. And so in some of those things include working on orientation week committee, student life committee, TEDx executive. I even work for Dal Security. I drive for Tiger Patrol, and I even was on a Dalhousie Varsity athletic team for a little while. Yeah, and I'll let everyone else introduce themselves.
Thank you. Next up, we have Irene.
So hi everyone, my name is Irene Rose Salyendra. I'm a 3rd-year business management student. I come from Fredericton, New Brunswick, so that's a little bit of my background. I'm a 3rd-year student, so yes, I'm quite young to be on here, but I feel that my experience from those 3 years have built me to where I'm confident enough to stand in front of you today and say that my qualifications reign to be very strong. I've worked primarily on campus and have done Dal After Dark events, reaching out, doing outreach through them. I've done Dalhousie Student Engagement Program, which have been focused more on resident students. And then at the same time, I volunteered for not just 1, 2, but all 3 of those years for Dal Lead, the Impact Awards, also Community Day, and have done Community Day 2.0, which just finished the past month. And all those initiatives have led me to see the gaps and also see the great students that are here at Dalhousie. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Devin.
Hey guys, as our moderator just said, my name is Devin Gorley. Obviously don't have to let you guys know the position I'm running for. I'm just really looking forward to discussing some of the issues tonight as far as student life and events go. I have some experience as a booking agent. I worked for 3 years with colleges and universities across Canada and the US, booking performance artists and musicians on their campus. So that's kind of my background. I'm really kind of looking forward to the audience submitted question portion of the night, just because I feel like really the main thing that we are here to do as Vice President Student Life is to serve you guys, not ourselves or each other. So please submit questions. I'm looking forward to hearing them. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we have our, as we did on VPAE, I'm just going to ask 3 easy questions just to get it started. So the first one, just at random, Irene, why are you the most qualified for this position?
Sure. Thank you. So why am I the most qualified? I feel in the 3 years that I have worked at Dalhousie, my resume speaks for itself. In year 1, I didn't just sought out opportunities for engagement for other people, but I sought for myself to be engaged, because I strongly believe that if I can't apply myself, I can't ask for others to be applied either. And then in year 2, I sought out for employment, and that employment I strongly wanted to be connected with student engagement and to have a way for students to feel like they belonged and have a place on campus. And then in second year, I looked towards more ways that I can outreach. So that was done through communications, that was done through social media. And then at the same time, I went and talked directly to students, being like, is this program actually working for you? Is Dal After Dark something that you want? And for people who don't know Dal After Dark, that is a program that does alternative events on high-risk drinking days. So that's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I went out and I reached out and asked directly to students if this was something that was wanted, if this was something that was needed. Obviously, the response is always yes. Oh, okay. And with those, I feel that builds my qualification. Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, Devin. How are you most qualified for this position?
So as I mentioned in my opening statement, I did work as a booking agent for 3 years when I lived in Ottawa. And so as part of that, there was a lot of work with college and university organizations, specifically with Vice President Student Life on a lot of these campuses. And that included attending the COCA conference, which, if anyone's not familiar, is the Canadian Organization for Campus Activities. And so basically we would pitch our musicians and artists to campuses to try to get them booked there. So VP Student Life is kind of the other side of that. I'm definitely familiar with a lot of the budget planning and the timing of campus event programming. So that's a big part of why I'm qualified. Thanks.
Thank you. Corey.
Yeah, so I already touched on quite a few things in my opening remarks in terms of my experience. A lot of my roles within the DSU have been centered around events and programming. And while that's not the entirety of the VPSL portfolio, it is a large part of it. So with VPI, that position handles organizing all the events and programming that the Arts and Social Sciences Society does. I've sat on O-Week and Dal Student Life for the past 3 years and gained a lot of experience there. But of course, I have sat in this position for the past year. I've learned so much. This is like, and it's not like any other position that I've ever sat on or even remotely close. There's such a steep learning curve when you come in this position. And if I am reelected, going back into it, I'm going to be that much more well prepared to do it again. But beyond that, yeah, so looking at that experience is really why I'm the most qualified. And when when you look at, there's such a steep turnaround on these positions year to year, it's important that when an executive wants to return, they bring so much institutional knowledge back with them.
Thank you.
That's important.
All right, and Tori.
Yeah, so again, like Corey, I touched upon a lot of my different involvements on campus in my opening remarks. But another thing I'd just like to add is I've really been able to be involved in student life from like multifacets across Dal. So not only through the DSU, but also through working with the university as well as residence life, which are like the three main focus groups on campus. So through these experiences, I really developed a passion and a tenacity for student life to create like a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. So I'm really ready to use those experiences that I have had and fresh ideas to enhance what I think the student life position could be. And like Corey said, I've also been a part of orientation week committee and student life for a number of years now, as well as TEDx exec and working for the university, like Dallas security, and even in campus recruitment as well. So yeah, all this knowledge that I bring, I think will make me really good qualifications for the role.
Thank you. All right. So, Devin, this first question is for you now. What is the greatest issue that your position is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
So I think the biggest issue for VP student life is definitely just student involvement, and whether that's in, you know, small events with, you know, small student groups, whether it's a large event, you know, like a concert like DalFest O Week. I think that's definitely the biggest issue. My plan quickly is to make sure that all our events are financially accessible, first of all, to students, because I think that obviously income is an issue. And so, I apologize. I think the biggest issue, sorry guys, pass.
All right, thank you. Corey.
Great. Yeah, so I think events and programming is definitely an issue to be talked about, but I think the bigger one is around student wellness. This is directly related to the student or the vice president's student life portfolio. Wellness is a big factor that I meet bi-weekly with Vice Provost Student Wellness to discuss issues that are relevant to that. We've done a lot this year to advocate for better access, specifically to mental health services. Over the past few years, Dallas had a legendarily long wait list to get in to see counselors and psychologists. And this year, one of the first things that I did was advocate to the university with my fellow executive to restructure how students access student wellness and how they access mental health services. And now we see a wait time of almost same-day appointments, if not the very next day. So continuing to work on that is definitely something that is one of my priorities. I've hired a wellness commissioner this year to look at strategizing how best the union can go about student wellness moving forward.
Thank you. Tori.
Yeah, so I think obviously there are so many issues that are important to this role, but one of the greatest issues I think as well is student engagement, and this includes getting students involved in the planning of student life events, but also getting a larger turnout to the events that we do have on campus. And this involves like better awareness and better advertising strategies that can go along with this. And like as a commerce student, I've had a huge background in marketing, so I think I could really bring a lot of knowledge to doing that. As well as like a new strategy would be introducing like a permanent calendar for student life events and society events in the DSU sub, as well as on Alumni Lounge on Sexton and on Carlton, so students are aware of what's going on campus should they want to join a society club or get involved, as well as knowing what's going on so they can really just engage in the community around them. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene.
So what I believe is the greatest issue for students is student life. This isn't an issue of just realizing that we need more events or we need wellness. It's all encompassing. It rounds out everything. So a lot of the times when people go in these positions, they're like, this is what I want the student body or I want the student life to look like. I want to see how students want their life to look like on campus. It's not just going to be my vision, it's going to be how student wants their vision. So I feel like the greatest issue is that disconnect between an executive's point of view of what a student life should look like and what the student life actually wants them to look like. So this year, there was nothing really done for queer folks. There was nothing really done for grad. Off-campus students feel very disconnected. And going forward, we can take this information and do something for pride. We don't have to connect with people. We can do something for ourselves. Do something for graduate students, an actual orientation week using in language that encompasses what they don't feel like they're a youth, they're a mature student, know what they are, be what they are. And an off-campus student, once you go off campus, you're not connected to residents anymore. So just know those connections, and also at the same time connect with those who have been here for years already. They entered our gates and they want to stay here, and let's welcome them and keep them engaged.
Thank you. All right. So the third and last opening questions, as I like to call them. We'll start with Corey. Personally, what is the biggest challenge that you will face holding this position?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is where the engagement piece comes in. We have a really strong communication strategy. Just coming in this year, we've done some shakeups in terms of how we strategize our social media and how we get our information out to students. And that's still definitely a challenge in this position. You know, once we hit after DALFest, we sort of see this slump and decline in attendance and turnout. But I think a way that we need to resolve this is by creating more tangible ways that students can get involved with their union. So this means more paid student commission positions. This means more open committees. This means going out and asking students to come into the union so that information is flowing out more easily. One of the greatest ways that I've seen people get involved with the union is by word of mouth and knowing people. And I know that's hard for 18,000 people, but we've seen it time and time again. Social media, you know, it has its impact and it has its value, but it's not the thing that's getting people to come into the union. What really gets people into the union is having something tangible that they can do for the union.
Thank you. Tori, personally, what is the biggest challenge that you'll face holding this position?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge that I think I'm going to face is getting proper student engagement and representation, in the DSU and on student life committees. I think right now we lack diversity and we lack representation from students across all 4 campuses. So one way I want to do this is by having a paid commissioner position from every campus at Dow, from all 4, as well as growing the student life committee to be as diverse as possible. In that way, we're able to have like diversity of opinion, create more ideas, and have a greater flow, as well as just like create inclusive and fun events for all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene, what is the biggest challenge you will face holding this position?
So the biggest challenge that I think I will face holding this position is acknowledging differences. I am a 3rd year student. I'm not a graduate student. I'm a management student. I'm not a dentistry student. So obviously I can't say I automatically know their needs or I automatically have assumed their needs. I'm going to go out and seek out what they actually need on campus, what their student life is on campus, what are their stress levels. I experience different stress levels than like a commerce student right off the bat, or even straight off like a dentistry student. I don't experience the same stresses. At the same time, my workspace, I don't experience the same needs that they have. So I want to see what they need and work towards providing what other students need instead of what I assume they need. And a big challenge that comes with that is obviously outreach and getting each other's opinions, but that can always, there's no barriers in getting people's word and what the people need. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Devin, what is the biggest challenge that you will face while holding this position?
Yeah, I think Corey and Tori kind of hit the nail on the head with the student involvement. The biggest issue, I think, or challenge I'll face is actually learning what the barriers are as to why people aren't getting involved. And I think that's something that we can learn by, you know, looking at the past, what people have done right, what people haven't done right in the DSU, and determining, you know, is it because people are just shy? Is it because people are apathetic? I'm not sure. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for me, is actually learning why people aren't getting involved and then taking steps to get them involved with these commissions.
Thank you. So that was the end of the introductory questions. So now we are going to have a CKDU spokesperson come up here, and if they'd like to take some time to talk about the referendum, then they can go and do that. And yeah, that is also welcome as well.
Hi, my name is Daryl. I'm from CKDU. I hope that you all know what we are, but if you don't, for the radio station, we're 1 floor up from here. We're running a levy campaign this year, so after successfully getting 1,000 signatures to get our question on the ballot, we are now moving into our campaign mode, which you guys are all in. So I just wanted to take a quick second to tell you who we are, what we're about, why we're running a levy increase, and what we hope to do with the money if we're successful. So like I said, we're the radio station. We've been a levied society at DAL since 1985. That was the first and only time we've received a levy increase. So since then, we've been rolling on pretty much the same budget. So obviously there's been some inflation and things like that that have pushed down on us. We're running for a $1 increase. And what we want to do with that money is take it and put it into student positions and student podcasting. So we're ideally going to take all that money. We've hired this year like a news coordinator, a music coordinator, an LGBTQ2+ coordinator, and a people of color coordinator, but we want to expand those student coordinator positions to have like 5, 6, 7, 8 students who are paid to like basically create collectives that create content for the radio station, and then also have like a fund available for like one-off podcasting content. So if you were like, I want to do a podcast on this specific issue, we would have money available for you to produce that, and also training and resources for you to be able to produce that content and get it out to students. So basically all the money is going into student content produced by students, for students, etc. Anyone got any questions? I think we'll have like 1 minute. That's probably about that much time. I'll say one last thing. I have a clipboard here. If you would be so kind and felt inclined and you're like, I'm going to vote for them, if you wanted to write your email address down, I would send you one email and one email only at the end of the campaign period saying, please remember to vote. Please remember to vote for CKDU if that's something you're up for. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. So, if you don't know me, I'm Mahbubur Rahman, and I was in DSU for a couple of years as Vice President Finance and Operations from 2014 and 16, and I have an experience of few campaigns, and I know how it feels, and I'm happy to see a lot of candidates in all the positions. It shows that students at this year are more engaged and more informed, so that's great to see. I congratulate all the candidates, all the campaign workers. I think it's pretty hard, but I think at the end it's rewarding, because whoever is working in the campaign in any capacity is like working for student to the betterment of student life in different way. So why I am here for, I'm like advocating for NSPERG. NSPERG is Nova Scotia Public Interest Research Group, is a student society, and NSPERG is asking for a levy increase. And what NSPERG do, NSPERG has a mandate of, is a resource center for social and environmental justice, and we have NSPERG, there is a lot of events going on, especially during the orientation. NSPERG have Project Reconstruct, that is alternate orientation. And in terms of resources, NSPERG have a yearly journal, NSPERG has a resource library, and lot of working group. For example, one is pretty popular, Divest Dal, and some others working group get support from NSPERG as well. NSPERG had a lot of funding opportunity for students have projects idea or their research, they can apply for those funding. So, and especially this year, NSPERG had a great project like NSPIRE, like featuring 100 students with an inspiration that was in the sub-wall for a month. And where the money will go if students say yes, it will be go to the student increasing the staff capacity to be more available to different events or programming, to have some part-time staff student staff positions that is not available on the current budget, and of course increasing the research granting to research grant, which we've seen like in current years we have more and more good application that would love to support, but due to financial constraint we couldn't do that. So that is a good thing. And of course with all around that, like the increase would help NSPERG for future stability and sustainability. So I think thank you all. I think you have the last thing I'll do to all the candidates and everyone, please, it's a tough time, but be aware of your self-care. That's the most important thing, because I remember during the campaign, the last day, even literally I couldn't stand. I was so much. So yes, take it hard, take it seriously, but of course, self-care is the most important thing during the years. And I wish you all the best, and please vote yes for NSPERG and encourage others to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So now is the time where we will be taking questions that have come from students. There will be a 5-minute discussion on these questions. If anybody in the audience has any questions that they would like to submit while the debate is going on, please see Kat right here at the front, and we'll make sure we can see if we can get those questions asked. So, Tori, I believe you were you the last one to speak? Or who's the last one to speak? Devin. Okay. So then it will be Tori. Yeah, it is Tori. Just trying to make sure my order is right. So Tori, if elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of racialized students at your events?
Yeah, so I think, well, like I myself do not identify with that group of students, so I cannot speak exactly on their behalf, but I think it's really important to get that representation, have that consultation with those groups, those societies who represent those students, so I can learn how to better represent them and even partner with them to create events that they want to go to, such as like the Black Panther screening that they had this month. I think events like that are a great way to get students involved. And yeah, so I'm really just looking for consultation, talking to students, finding out how I can address their needs, and really just looking for events that would be inclusive to their interests and what they want on campus. Thanks.
Thank you, Tori. Irene, if elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of racialized students at your events?
Absolutely. So one big thing that I want to do is create lines of communication. So as a student VP, student life VP, I'll be sitting on the student life committee. And in that, and representation from the society here at Dalhousie directly would be one of the greatest starts. And then from there, a connection to maybe an organization here in Halifax to see what celebrations they have on the daily, what kind of communities they have, what kind of needs that they have as a student, as like on a mental health note, what kind of needs they have in wellness, and start from there and build from there for to encompass a plan that fits a calendar that works for them. So what holidays they celebrate, and then go from there. Yeah.
Thank you. Devin, if elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of racialized students at your events?
Right. So I side with Tori, and it's obvious that I'm not a racialized student. So definitely a big part of it is learning and expanding on my knowledge of the issues that these students are facing on campus, and definitely increasing, things like cultural events. I know right now a lot of our like student societies are organizing the cultural events, and so expanding beyond that and expanding into working on that myself and working with these groups of students to organize events through the Office of the VP Student Life is really important, and making those events more regular throughout the school year, and not just at one time, in March, April when it's kind of cultural event season or however we we want to call it. So that's definitely important for sure.
Thank you. And Corey,
Yeah.
if elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of racialized students at your events?
Yeah, so I think the greatest thing I've learned this year about representing communities that I'm not a part of is to just shut up and listen to them. They know what they want, and they know how they can feel included in our activities. So it's about sitting down and finding out what it is and then putting that into action. Something that I saw work really well, especially for OEIC this year, is the creation of a subcommittee off the orientation committee made up of racialized folks whose job it was to go through and review each of the programming that we were running and identify ways that it might not be so inclusive for racialized individuals. And that saw a great success as maybe anecdotally, we had one of our most successful OEICs. And so sort of taking that idea and expanding it to all our programming and services and making sure that we really are putting those words into action and that we're listening.
All right, thank you. So, candidates, you will now get 5 minutes to have an open discussion on this issue. No candidate will speak longer than 30 seconds uninterrupted, and please be respectful to one another. You may begin with whoever would like to speak.
We're all such nice people here. We're all giving the toss to go first.
So we're not allowed to address questions to each other, correct?
No, it's just
So one of my fellow candidates mentioned that listening was important, and I absolutely agree. And so I'm curious as to in this candidate's prior experience, what's the best way to get that kind of feedback? Is it email polling? Is it going right down on the ground asking questions yourself? Is it asking someone to do it for you? Is it appointing someone? Yeah, these are the kinds of questions that I'm just genuinely curious about.
Yeah, I guess I will respond as someone who's held this position and has done that kind of communication with racialized folks, the best way is to go to the organizations that represent them. So these are societies that specific mandate is to represent racialized folks on campus, Black Student Societies, the International Center, the International Society. Those folks are the best people because they are students and they know what the biggest issues that their students who are in the same community as them are facing. And by being proactive, you're showing that you're having an open line of communication. And if they choose to work with you, then great. If they don't, then that's fine too. Then you just sort of have to respect that. But that's the best way that I found.
I think as well, one way to do this is having that representation in student life committee themselves. So reaching out to those students at the beginning of the year and asking if anyone on their society wants to get involved in student life, because it's always great to have a diverse group of students on student life committee, because it only fosters a community where we can come up with creative events that everyone is interested in and everyone like, or even just events where other students can learn about different cultures. So like last year or the year before, I went to the International Student Society through like a night around the world where I got to learn so much that I didn't know before. So if we can like kind of bring those students in instead of just sitting on their own societies, but kind of bringing those societies together with student life, that would be a great way to represent them.
So, what I took from that question and the way I'm going to answer it, when I look at the calendar for what student life has done for this year for racialized students, I look at celebrations that I would celebrate with friends, such as Eid and Ramadan, Chinese New Year, Black History Month. It was a month, not a day. And so just acknowledging those other celebrations that international students go and enjoy, and at home it's a party, it's a fiesta, it's amazing, and then here it becomes 3 hours. That's not connecting to their culture. That's for me personally, if someone were to connect to my Filipino heritage, that's not connecting to my culture. Another thing is we're doing expos and raising money for and oh, I'm sorry.
It's just been past 30
Oh,
seconds.
sorry.
If anybody else would like to speak. If not, then she can keep going.
Okay. Sure. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So one idea that I actually thought was sort of make it more of a semestral event of instead of like a society expo, make it an international expo. Nothing for charity, nothing to raise money or any of that. Just simply to show diversity, simply to show each other's culture, each other's heritage, and by showing the culture and showing our dances, our celebration, our music, the way that we speak, the way that we interact with each other, that will bring inclusivity because we gain an understanding from each other's diversity. Now I'm done.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we recognize those things and the different celebrations that happen. But there are societies and groups on campus whose specific mandate it is to sort of celebrate those things. So when it comes to something like Chinese New Year, you know, the Chinese Society organizes that, and they know what Chinese New Year is supposed to look like. In terms of my position specifically, I'm looking to create programming that's general to all students, and working with those groups to better promote those things and better bring them into the culture. But for me to throw a party for Chinese New Year, it would be like, Corey, you're not Chinese. So I think it's about working with those societies, absolutely, and collaborating with them. But yeah.
Cool. All right. So we'll move on to the next question. So the next question is quite. It's in a similar vein. So Irene, if elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of persons of disability at your event?
Absolutely. So actually, I could do an example that we did from this year. I helped and was on the organizing committee for Dell Lead, and one of the big issues that came up was accessibility. I'll be straight up, and it was an issue the year before, and we're like, we want to make sure that it's not an issue, or at least decrease the issue, move steps forward for this year. We started by changing location. We made it all in the row. That way, it didn't have to be from people going from the sub to the McCain to the row. We made it all in one location, and we made sure that in that location, there were places that was accessible for wheelchairs. We made sure that people that had needs were met with volunteers. We made sure that there was someone there that could help you. We made sure that if you had you needed someone to do sign language, we would find someone for that disability. And those are ways that we have been moving forward, and I will continue to implement these practices that I've already done on campus.
Thank you. Devin, same question. If elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of persons of disability at your events?
Yeah, so I think number one, transportation, especially to off-campus events, is a huge priority. Ensuring that there are, for example, wheelchair accessible buses. That's just something that definitely needs to be looked at right away. I also love Irene's localization. Making sure everything's in one place. We don't have to kind of go on an Easter egg hunt to different parts of the event is great. And at the same time, not making sure that we're not eliminating events that aren't traditionally accessible, and working on ways that we can actually get students with mobility issues to those events is super important, and expanding and diversifying ways that we can access those events without removing any.
Thank you. Corey, same question. If elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of persons of disability at your events?
Yeah, so we're mandated by our bylaws and policies to ensure that all our events and programming is accessible to all students. So that's definitely something that's always on my mind when we're going into event programming and facilitation. Certainly, I think we could be better at being proactive about providing information about our accessible events. But definitely this year, I think we've been quick to react and accommodate students who have come forward with concerns about accessibility. So we always ensure that if we are going off campus, that we do have some sort of service ready and available to take students who may need a different kind of transportation. We make sure that when we're going to off-campus locations, that we're connecting with those providers and ensuring that there is either someone there who we can connect with on accessibility, or that they're upfront about communicating to us how they their limitations in terms of how they can provide accommodations for students with disabilities. So I think it's a lot about that, and again, we keep coming back to collaboration, but it is important. I don't represent students with disabilities, so again, it's about sitting down and listening to their needs.
Thank you.
Better.
And Tori, if elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of persons of disability at your events?
Yeah, so one thing I'd really like to point out that I think is super important is recognizing that not all disabilities are overt and they're not always visible. So I think it's really important to consider the wide spectrum of students and how we can make our events accessible to every single student. And like all of my candidates said, that's touching on location. Like, for example, the university club is not accessible to people in wheelchairs. So hosting an event in the U Club on the third floor would not be a good spot. And so yeah, it's really about making sure that you're reaching out to those student groups, reaching out to the Accessibility Center for resources, finding out how exactly we can use all of our resources on campus to learn and figure out exactly how we can make all of our events accessible to the entire student body. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so candidates, have 5 minutes to discuss this issue. Because you guys have been quite cordial and polite, I'll actually give you guys 45 seconds instead of 30 seconds to talk. Because you all been so polite. Whenever you guys are ready, you may begin.
Yeah, I can talk about one initiative that I've been working on this year. So I work for Tiger Patrol, and this summer I worked for Dallas Security and Tiger Patrol as a coordinator. And one of the biggest issues we addressed with some of the executives in the DSU this summer was accessibility, and how the Tiger Patrol vans are not accessible to students with disabilities, or to some students with disabilities. And we were trying to find different ways to create a similar service to do so. So I think it's really important kind of having those open dialogues about what's not working and how we can improve resources that we already provide to students like Tiger Patrol, but making it accessible to everyone.
On that note, oh, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that note, during Dalit, we experienced more later in the day. It was someone who was in a wheelchair who needed to get home, and they couldn't get home, and the flow of events that occurred was the most ridiculous thing, because they didn't have a place to put the wheelchair in, essentially, for them to be taken home. And it's ridiculous to think that we have a society who's very open to finding new ways, and yet this issue is a constant issue. So partnering with places where they could maybe stay out a little bit longer to help with those needs would be one step forward.
Yeah, I guess something else that we advocate a lot for on behalf of students to the university is pointing out, a lot of these buildings are really old and their structures are definitely not inclined for physical access, and really trying to push and press the university to consider and create plans to ensure that when they're considering renovations, which they are doing quite a lot of these days, that they're making sure that they're incorporating that idea of physical access to the spaces that they want to create and how they can better improve the spaces that they already have.
I think that's interesting too, because disabilities aren't a modern concept.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, I think, we keep talking about communicating and learning the needs of students with accessibility issues. And I think my big question is, how are we going to do that? What methods are we going to implement to actually get the feedback that we need? And so, like I mentioned before, email is one option. I know that lots of people, just opt out of email lists, especially from school, because they get a lot of it and they don't have time to look through it. So, are we doing a social media campaign where it's like let us know what you need from us? I think is one option. But that's definitely a question I'd like to kind of address to everybody.
You guys still have 2 minutes left if you want to keep discussing. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Yeah, I can add to that. Well, I can also, one thing I brought up in my initial discussion was recognizing that, not all disabilities are visible. And I think that's really important in reaching out to those students as well and figuring out a way that we can represent those students in student life events and programming, but as well as, just their, well-being and mental health. So I think that's something that I really like to focus on if elected, and working with the services that we already have on campus supporting those students, but how we can better support it on a DSU side instead of just the university.
All right, if no one else wants to continue discussion, then we will move on. So, I'm terrible at remembering. I'm sorry. I believe it was Devin's turn to answer the question first. So Devin, again, this is closer to the same vein. If elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of LGBT students at your events?
For sure. So, sorry, can I ask for clarification? Are we talking at events or planning specifically events for LGBT students?
It would be in the same vein as the other two questions, so
Sure.
at your events.
Sure. So, definitely programming events specifically for LGBTQ students. I was doing some research actually on something called Alt Prom. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. We hosted one in the U Club this year called the Halifax Prom. It was based on something called the People's Prom in Vancouver, which I think is a great idea. It's kind of like a radical alternative to Valentine's Day is how they build it, which is super cool. And I think, the main thing, like we've been saying, is keeping lines of communication open. We need to make sure that everyone is in a place that they want to be in. We need to make sure that everyone feels like their voices are being heard. We need to make sure that people of all, cultures and colors and acronyms are being represented.
Thank you. Corey, same question. If elected, how will you ensure the inclusion of LGBT students at your events?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of, we've talked a lot about this in regards to some other marginalized communities, but pretty much the same sort of idea is that it's about collaboration. It's about listening to those needs and about finding ways in which you can engage those students. There are specific societies and organizations that are very prevalent on this campus whose job it is to provide programming specific to LGBTQ communities and individuals. My job is to try to work with those groups when we can and see where we can improve our own events that are more generally open, but also collaborate with those groups when they think that they have an event that might be general to the students' population.
Thank you. Tori, same question. If elected, how you ensure the inclusion of LGBT students at your events?
Yeah, again, we've been talking about a whole bunch of marginalized groups on campus, and kind of echoing what Corey said, it really comes down to representation and collaboration with the societies and organizations on campus that already exist. But another thing I'd like to kind of touch upon is like LGBTQ plus. Now it encompasses so many different types of people that we also have to recognize that they don't all have the exact same needs and wants and desires. So it's recognizing the different communities within that banner and how we can provide support to each one and figure out a way how we can include everyone in campus events. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Tori. Irene, same question. If elected, how you ensure the inclusion of LGBT students at your events?
Yeah, for sure. So, one large thing that I think is widely known across campus is gender neutral washrooms. There's little accessibility to gender neutral washrooms. You shouldn't have to walk from the Mona Campbell to the sub to access a gender neutral washroom. And at the same time, having queer spaces. I've been talking during my campaign, before I was even campaigning, while I was working, to LGBTQ plus identified people, and these queer spaces at Dal Lead, we had for the first time a quiet space, and that was a space that they could go if someone felt overstimulated from the conversation. That's We could have a queer space on campus if someone ever needs that kind of space just to themselves, if they want to talk to someone, if they need that support, and we can partner with Dal Out and make these places happen.
Thank you. All right, so just as before, we will do 5 minutes of discussion. If you guys want to discuss, I'll cut you off after 45 seconds. Any one of you may begin.
Yeah, so I think we've talked a lot about incorporating these different groups into our events and programming, but I want to highlight that that's not the sole vice president student life portfolio. There's also wellness, there's also athletics. So we really need to look at also how are these groups represented currently in our wellness programming, but also how they interact with the university and different and the Canadian healthcare system at large. How are they represented in our athletics and our recreation activities, and how can we better support them in those areas?
So my point was, going off of that, is what would their daily life be? So how would they be tackling stress in their daily life? What kind of ways are they dealing with stress that maybe someone that doesn't identify the same way as they do deals with stress? And how does campus maybe generate that stress? And if we can put it the opposite way and make it a place that can relieve that stress, make it somewhere that's a safer space for them to go on their daily life if they're between classes and they're like, I don't feel comfortable right now, I don't feel welcomed right now, and they can on their do schoolwork or something that they can feel welcomed in that and belonged in that space.
If no one else has anything to add, we will move on. There's still 3 minutes and 40 seconds left, though, if anybody does have anything. Okay, so we will move on. This is another question from a student. It is also on the similar vein, and it has precise wording, so I want to make sure I get this right. So, Corey, you'll be going first with this. The Black Panther movie screening took place with the DSU and several other societies on a past Friday in order to celebrate Black representation in the media. How would you ensure the occurrence of similar events that celebrate diversity? Please distinguish between racial diversity, ability diversity, and gender diversity in your response as opposed to grouping them all together.
Yeah, so a fantastic question and a fantastic event to go off of as well. So I think, again, it's about continuing to keep those partnerships and those collaborative lines of communication that we create from these events and continue to work on those and continue to build off of them. And I recognize that sometimes we do group marginalized communities together, and that's unfortunate, and we shouldn't be doing that. So when it comes to working with these different societies, is making sure that they feel like in collaborating with these communities, making sure that we're focusing on the issues that they're presenting us, and we're doing what we can to represent them in a way that's how they want it done. So we keep coming back to this, but it's just about listening and collaborating and making sure that we're being we're appreciating everyone's intersectionality, but also making sure that when it comes to focusing on one group of people, that we're focusing on that one group of people.
Thank you. So, Tori, I'll say the question again. The Black Panther movie screening took place with the DSU and several other societies on a past Friday in order to celebrate Black representation in the media. How would you ensure the occurrence of similar events that celebrate diversity? Please distinguish between racial diversity, ability diversity, and gender diversity in your response, as opposed to grouping them all together.
Yeah, one thing I think it's really important to recognize is like diversity is all about intersectionality and how we do fall into different different groups. And I think for marginalized communities, they all have their own needs and desires, and I think it's really important in supporting them is to ensure that it's like so equal support, like I ensuring that we're not favoring a certain marginalized group over another. And I think it's really important, again, just collaboration with with those societies, with those organizations, to better help support those students' needs and interests. Because again, I don't identify with a lot of those groups, so I think I can't speak for them. So it's really important that I'm not creating events for them, but working with marginalized groups. Thanks.
Thank you, Tori. Irene, how will you ensure the occurrence of similar events that celebrate diversity? Please distinguish between racial diversity, ability diversity, and gender diversity in your response, as opposed to grouping them all together.
Absolutely. So intersectionality is an utmost importance when it comes to representation, and acknowledging the gender diversity, the culture diversity, the ability diversity of everyone on campus is of utmostly a priority whenever we create events. But of course, when we collaborate with these organizations, we want to make sure that their needs of students are being met, and then we're not just overshadowing them with what we believe that it should be done or how we believe that events should be done, but how they want them to be done. And that's going to be the main priority. And I feel like this is being echoed across the panel right now. But of course, if they want to have movie screenings specifically that was shown by them, then that's what we're going to do. Right before we had another conference, we featured a movie screening from that featured Indigenous colonization road, and that was one way that we showed that marginalized group.
Thank you. And Devin, I'll repeat the question for you as well. How would you ensure the occurrence of similar events that celebrate diversity? Please distinguish between racial diversity, ability diversity, and gender diversity in your response, as opposing to grouping them all together.
Sure. I think it's definitely important to to do it in a way that these groups want to be represented. I haven't seen Black Panther yet, so no spoilers, thanks. I think one thing that could be really interesting is to just do research to find out what other pieces of media are celebrating other cultures in this similar way and featuring those. Whether it's books, having a talk on a book, or whether it's another film or just anything like that, I think that would be great. There's similar events, but there's there can be diversity in the pieces of media and the way that we actually portray and let the event take place. So yeah, that's one idea for sure.
All right, thank you. Candidates, you have 5 minutes to discuss. You don't have to use the whole 5 minutes. I want to be clear on that. And you may begin whenever.
Something I want to add is the importance of ensuring that there's reflection for these communities, not only in the union itself, but at DAL as well. So something that's very important is making sure that these different marginalized communities can see themselves represented in their union and at DAL. So it means advocating to the university and saying you needed Indigenous reps or an Indigenous counselor so that Indigenous students seeking wellness services see themselves in that institution. It's about bringing in specific, people from those communities to, whether it's bringing in more musicians from the Black community or the Muslim community or the Indigenous community. It's about bringing in, folks with disabilities to come speak with students. These are events that all students can enjoy, but specific groups of students can see themselves reflected in that programming, which is really important.
And kind of going off that is creating a student union or a student life committee in which students again are represented and feel represented and know that like their voices are being heard on that committee. So whether it's like Corey said, bringing in something when student life is planning that programming, bringing in a society or an organization that like represents the Black Student Society. If we wanted to bring in Black artists to play on campus, I think it's really important to have that representation and to feel like those groups are being brought into the planning and are represented in the planning instead of, I guess, us planning it for them.
I mean, as far as bringing more diverse artists onto campus, my question is why aren't we doing that anyway? That should automatically be a consideration when we're talking about live music programming and things like that. We should automatically be bringing in more African artists, more Indigenous artists. I was at the Tea Room a few weeks ago, and there was a hip hop night I think that they have in there, and it's like once every month. Like, why aren't we doing that once every 2 weeks? I think that event went over awesome, and it was just all local hip hop artists. So things like that should just be an automatic consideration.
On the media side of that, I've partnered very many times with North of 49, who is a Canadian, which is a Canadian local that showcase Canadian local films. And in those Canadian films, they show gender diversity, culture diversity, ability diversity in many of their different films. And I feel like if films is something that they want to be more known on campus, that is something that we can definitely do with local.
All right, if nobody else has anything, that is the end of that question. So we will be taking a very short break, and then we'll be coming back. Anybody in the audience, again, if you have any questions, please come see Kat at the front. We very much appreciate to hear what you guys want to ask. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we are back. Before we get started, I just want to say that we now have some uh, sexual assault and harassment information pamphlets as well as contact information up here if anybody would like to come get some. So um, now we're going to ask Tori. So this question is for you starting. Um, Orientation week is a large part of this position. How do you plan on improving a week?
Yeah, okay, so I am really lucky that I've been able to participate in 5 weeks at DAL as a student, a leader, a head leader, and 2 years on orientation week committee when I was on exchange for a little bit of it. So orientation week is first year's students like first interaction with the Dalhousie community, and by all this participation and the number of positions that I've sat in associated with orientation week, I have the knowledge where I know where O Week needs improvements and I know how to make those improvements. And like figuring out a way to drive the positivity and engagement of first years during orientation week into the rest of the year is what we need at DAL to really bring first years out of res and more onto campus in the campus community. But one thing I don't want to neglect is grad students and mature students and even international students who have other needs, and orientation week may not be the right one. So really finding programming for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene, same question. Orientation week is a large part of this position. How do you plan on improving a week?
Absolutely. So I have also been an O-Week leader. No, not to that capacity, but I've also talked to other people who have participated in O-Week, who have gone to their O-Week and then transferred, or who have just transferred here and that kind of thing. So, of course, first and foremost, there wasn't a grad orientation, and that needs to change because they are just as important students as first-year students coming. Mature students are also just as important, and instead of calling it O-Week, straight up say orientation week. If they're a grad student or if they're new to the school, they might not know what O Week is. They might not know and if they don't know, they might not want to participate. Using that inclusive language to give a better understanding to students that are coming here. Also making it accessible to students with disabilities, to students who might not be able to do the really loud music, that kind of thing. If it's mature students, maybe having also childcare be an option for them if they so need it. And also international students. I know. Oh wait, is that a countdown? Okay, I'm gonna keep talking. So if so, so if it's international students, I know they have their own O week, but maybe intertwining them instead of making them feel completely separate from
All
the
right.
O week.
There we go. Sorry about that. Devin, same question. Orientation week is a large part of this position. How do you plan on improving a week?
For sure. I think one idea is to get student societies more involved in O Week. I think it's a great way to have current students and incoming students kind of get an idea of what societies and groups there are on campus and get involved right away with a community that they can, really find interest in and kind of find a home in, which is definitely important for obviously first years to feel like they are accepted and they belong right away. Another idea is to diversify DALFest a bit. So obviously, DALFest is the big concert during O Week. One thing that I'm a big fan of is low-key musical events. So, getting something going in like the sub atrium, for example, where it's like an intimate and acoustic event for students who like music but don't want the big crowd or something like that, so we can really kind of expand in that way to make it accessible to everybody.
Thank you. And Corey, same question. Orientation week is a large part of this position. How do you plan on improving a week?
Yeah, so I've also been involved with O-Week for the past couple of years, mostly with the planning committee, 2 years as just a regular committee member, and of course this past year as VPSL. Something that I've learned a lot is that we've sort of developed this sort of equation for O-Week over the past 3 years. We have a system, it works, and so we continue to do it. But what that leaves you with is sort of this thing where we stop trying to improve ourselves and we stop trying to better orientation week for our students. And so we kind of go, well, 1,500 students showed up last year, so that's good enough. And no, it's not good enough. We need to be shooting to make sure that all first years and all students who are coming to DAL for their first time can feel like they can engage with this programming that we're offering. And so one of the biggest things that I've learned is sort of not being so closed-minded to new ideas and trying new things, which is something that we did a lot this year in terms of our decisions around how to best engage students with the community, doing programming that extended beyond just orientation week and that was applicable to all students. I'll touch a little bit more on in the discussion period, but that's sort of where I'm at right now.
All right, thank you. So yes, you guys have 5 minutes to discuss. You guys get 45 seconds of uninterrupted time before I'll cut you off. You may begin.
Yeah, sure, I can start. So, like I said, I've had that wide experience of all these different positions in terms of OE, so I've really been able to see it through every kind of lens that it's provided. And a lot of like Corey said, there's a very strict, I guess, schedule for orientation week. And in my 5 years of participating, it has changed minimally. Like I would say one or two events, and that's it. So if I were to be elected, I really want to kind of take a clean slate on O Week, open up the floor to completely new ideas and how we can integrate societies and other organizations on campus into making O Week a more well-rounded week for students.
Yeah, and a big piece of what's missing from orientation week is an assessment piece that comes after it. So that we go back and we're reviewing what we did, what worked, what didn't work, and also taking that opportunity to engage. You know, this is one of the biggest audience that the union sees in terms of its programming events, and it's one of the biggest opportunities that we have to directly engage with students. And we should be taking that opportunity to engage with them and talk about, you know, where are you from? What are you doing? What is enticing you about this event specifically that you want to come to it? And how can we use that information going forward to ensure that we're bettering the programming that we're offering? Just speaking a little bit to some other things that were mentioned, you know, we try to incorporate grad students as much as possible, but we also recognize that there are grad societies and associations that provide their own specific orientation to those grad students that is more specified for them
45 seconds.
in a graduate. Is that 45?
Yeah, I really like the idea of getting groups involved that aren't traditionally represented, I guess, in O Week. So groups that already exist on campus, like Tori and I said, the societies and the the different cultural groups and things like that. Polling them, seeing what they would want to do as part of O Week, and I think definitely starting with a clean slate is important. Why not just kind of throw out the recipe and try something new? I think that is sometimes a good idea in more aspects on campus than just event programming. But yeah, I think kind of getting those polls out, things like that would be important to see kind of where people want to be involved and how they want to get their groups involved.
And then my kind of take on that point of view. I think what we have is fantastic. I love that we welcome the students and we say alcohol harm reduction, safe sex. Those are all needed. Those are all very much needed and validated in their use throughout their university career. But we could also take out maybe some things that aren't as needed or repetitive and then replace it with something that's something new. Maybe incorporate a blanket exercise on the quad and get people seeing a different kind of perspective on each other and their students and going forward in their lives. People coming from small towns, people coming from big towns, they can all incorporate these ideas right in the start of O Week. And then with that, also welcoming them with the DSU app. Digital natives are the next generation entering our buildings, and a digital app that actually is functional and effective would be a good step forward. Is that 45 seconds?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And you guys got 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I think just going back again, when it comes to incorporating societies into orientation week, we absolutely welcome and are pretty proactive in engaging with them. The biggest problem, though, is that a lot of societies aren't ready to go by the time orientation hits, and so we try to provide more opportunities to them once they get here and they've set themselves up, because a lot of executives leave for the summer, and then in order to ask them to come back before classes even start to set up and get themselves ready to go for orientation week, when the Society Expo is just a couple weeks later, and that they have that time to prepare. We can do a lot more in terms of making sure that we're providing specific programming for specific things. But again, one of our biggest goals is to ensure that we're getting students in, we're getting them connected. Is that it? Yeah.
I think one other really big thing that we had this year was unmotivated first years to come out to events. Like I was a leader this year, and it was impossible to get my students to come out to events. And I think it's more about how do we motivate student leaders on campus to want to be a part of orientation week. That was a really big issue this year, is that motivation from upper year students to kind of want to show new students the DAL community. And I think it's really important to reach out to upper year students super far in advance so they can kind of think about how they might want to be involved, how they can use their resources that they have to better get first years involved, which is, I think, really important for motivating students to come out and be a part of O Week.
And then I want to build on that point and say, looking at the initiatives and the motives of the first year that are coming in, maybe instead of like thinking about what we can do for our leaders, also talking to first year students that have just entered. What are their motives? Why didn't they go to their O week? And maybe building from that and expanding from that to understand and build motivations for the next year coming in to participate in an O week.
I think that goes along really well with. Do I have time?
No, we just ended. But thank you guys. That was a good discussion. Now we're going to move to Irene. So this first question is for you. How much experience do you have with health and safety services on campus and collaborating with those services?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I stated previously, I worked with Dal After Dark for many of my second year and going on to my third year, and that's a health alcohol harm reduction, and which has now been alcohol and drug harm reduction. They're now located in the International Center. I've had countless hours of working with them, trying to find alternative programming that students are engaged in and wanted, and during my year, they were very much participated. At the same time, I also had conversed with Jake McIsaac on what Dal Security has done, how it has changed, how it has morphed, how Tiger Patrol has morphed, and has become something of a survivor vehicle, but can also be used for students that can access it. So yes, I've had those conversations, and yes, I will continue to have those conversations because I know that that's a need and that's constant.
Thank you. Devin, same question. How much experience do you have with health and safety services on campus and collaborating with those services?
So to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with the health and safety services on campus. I do really like Irene's idea of working to program events that are less heavy on the consumption of alcohol, for example, and more low key events and events that kind of apply to a diverse range of people and range of interests. For example, board game nights, movie nights are something we've been doing a little more of. And so I think that's a really good idea, just to minimize the, I guess, potential for unhealthy behavior that events can have. Programming events that don't have any.
Thank you there. Corey, same question. How much experience do you have with healthy and safety services on campus and collaborating with those services?
Yeah, so a big part of the VPSL's role is around wellness and safety. Obviously, our number one concern with any event programming service that we offer is student safety. We've worked a lot with Dal Security around Orientation Week and other events. We've worked with Dal After Dark to try and better open our lines of communication to ensure that there's more cohesive programming. A lot of the time what we find is that Dal After Dark is doing an event that the DSU is doing 2 weeks later or vice versa. And we're really trying to make sure that those communicated approaches are taken and understand that Dal After Dark's approach to alcohol harm reduction is going to be different from the DSU's. Moreover, sitting on the alcohol advisory committee has been a huge experience for me in terms of specifically looking at alcohol harm and trying to advocate to the university, saying, abstinence is one way to go about alcohol harm reduction, but there are a lot of other ways that you can do that. And what we really try to highlight to them is, we want to bring students onto this campus so that they're engaging with these programming on this campus in our bars, so that we make sure that we have staff that are student-centric.
All right. Tori, same question. How much experience do you have with health and safety services on campus and collaborating with those services?
Yeah, so for the past 2 years, I've been working with Dal Security. I was hired as their community outreach co-op student 2 years ago, and I stayed on in that role. And last year, over the summer, I was actually the Tiger Patrol coordinator. So I've had a lot of experience working with security on the university side, as well as working with the DSU to, again, ensure safety at orientation week, ensure safety of students on campus. One thing we do with Tiger Patrol is all students are allowed to call Tiger Patrol, but we have student safety plans. So if a student's ever been experienced sexual assault or violence on campus, they can call a separate line for Tiger Patrol, and they're our priority students. As well as, working with Jake, I've had so many opportunities through Dal Security to really understand how safety works on campus and how we can better provide safety to students.
Thank you there, Tori. And now, for the four of you, you got 5 minutes to talk about this issue. You have 45 seconds, and then I will cut you off. Begin.
Yeah, so another thing, talking about health for events, also looking at some things like some events happening at the Delplex as well. We haven't really had many events. I've coordinated events in the Delplex, which have also connected with athletics as well, which will also be another role that I will be playing, that I will be doing as VPSL. So that experience and that background with it will push forward with creating events in the Delplex to make it accessible and also connecting with athletics.
Yeah, it's really exciting because the Dalplex is, of course, getting its new renovation, which is going to open up whole new potential to host activities and events there, and also hosting them in a space that's much more accessible. I don't know, the Dalplex is confusing for me, even someone who's gone there for 4 years. So I think that space holds a lot of potential. Yeah, I think I was just building on that point.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Like tying it back to how I want to improve safety on campus is, as VPSL, I want to work with DAL Security and DMCRT and Tiger Patrol in planning student life events, so they're fully versed in the entire event before it happens, so we can bring in DMCRT and better utilize that service and better utilize our DAL security officers so they know where students are going to be, when they're going to be there, to ensure the safety of students in event planning.
Yeah, DCMRT has been a fantastic resource for us this year. They've always been checking in on major events that they consider that might show some risk to it, and we've developed a pretty good relationship with them and ensuring that they're almost a standardized service that we now anticipate and plan to have at our events that we see as being particularly dangerous in terms of alcohol consumption or anything else in that regard.
I think one thing that we need to consider as well is something that one of the candidates in the last debate brought up, was the idea that, you know, possibly people don't feel safe when Dalhousie security is around. And so I think that, you know, just working on specifically event venues to minimize the potential for harm, especially in the way of alcohol consumption, but just generally making sure that the events are taking place in a safe space overall, and reduce the need for, you know, possibly securities being there.
I think one other really important thing is we have so many other safety services on campus, like the DMCRT, like mental health support services, as well as the sexual assault center. And I think it's really important to better educate students about those and make students more aware to those services, because a lot of students have certain ideas or opinions of what those things are, but they may not know exactly how they can help students. And I think if we can better educate students about those, we can better use those resources, because yes, like physical safety is important, but also mental health and mental safety is important as well.
I absolutely agree, and I think it goes back to the conversation we were having of how. And I think that's kind of the big question, is we can talk about, you know, we're going to communicate this, and we're going to let people know about this, and we're going to let people know about that, but the real question is, how are we going to do that? And I don't have an answer at the moment, but I don't believe that any of my fellow candidates have given an answer to that tonight either.
All right. If no more discussion, then we'll move along. Devin, this first question is for you. So the Olympics just happened here, and there was not any student life programming around it. Do you think the DSU should be doing programming around massive events that generate international public interest, such as the Olympics, FIFA World Cup, etc.?
I do. I think the Olympics especially, you know, they don't happen every year or anything like that. And so I think it's a good way to capitalize on different student interests. I know there was a band, Arkells, who played here before, who actually got in touch with Air Canada, and they were flown to the Olympics. So, you know, why aren't we bringing in Canadian musicians or Canadian talent to help promote, you know, the Olympics, do a show and then show an Olympic event or something like that? Just capitalizing on the buzz that those types of events generate by themselves is a great way to just increase attendance at small events around campus.
All right, thank you. Corey, same question. The Olympics just happened, and there was not any student life programming around it. Do you think the DSU should be doing programming around massive events that generate international public interest, such as the Olympics, FIFA World Cup, etc.?
I think those events definitely hold the potential to, you know, inspire different events that could be related to them, but it's an unfortunate fact about timing of those events as well. The Winter Olympics took place about a week before Reading Week and then into Reading Week as well. And so when you're looking at those 2 weeks specifically, this past year at least, you have midterms that whole week, and then you're on reading week. So trying to engage students at that time is really unfortunate, and I wish that we could have done more to try and engage students on that fact, but it just didn't line up. But moving forward, I think that absolutely I'm always open to, when there's something big happening, that we're looking for areas in which we can take that event and use it in inspiring new programming events and services that we offer to students.
All right, thank you, Corey. Tori, the Olympics just happened and there's not any student life programming around it. Do you think the DSU should be doing programming around massive events that generate international public interest, such as the Olympics, FIFA World Cup, etc.?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's really special about athletics is it transcends a lot of barriers that we have between each other. So something like FIFA World Cup, it would be awesome if we could throw events where students are able to come and support their team and like root for maybe their friend's country or another country if ours isn't represented. But also really cool international sporting events like the Cricket World Cup. We have such a huge following on campus that like their home countries have massive cricket teams, and I know like when I was on exchange, that was something that was really cool to watch. So kind of seeing what kind of sporting events or events that are important to people people who come from all over the world, and being able to showcase that, showcase new things, as well as having the kind of programming that can bring us all together and kind of create a community where we can all root for like one common goal. Thanks.
All right, and Irene, the Olympics just happened and there was not any student life programming around it. Do you think the DSU should be doing programming around massive events that generate international public interest, such as the Olympics, FIFA World Cup, etc.?
So I absolutely do believe that. It's something that everyone's watching, everyone's talking about, so why not? Of course, like Corey said, timing was unfortunate, but the question did say working around these events. So if it's not during it, it could be before, it could be after. One thing when I was campaigning is someone mentioned, when I asked what events do you want to see, they wanted to see a sports week. So maybe right after an event like this happens, having a sports week featuring that, or while it's happening, I know it's during midterms, but having a little bit of a screening, like having a projector in the international sector, connecting the international students with the people that they see on TV, going down to Sexton. I know there is a giant cultural background down in Sexton that would be amazing to screen even the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup, and working around their schedules and making it not as based more on numbers, but based more on impact of each other's students and gaining that diversity and inclusion through that experience.
All right, thank you. So candidates, you have 5 minutes to discuss this issue. I'll cut you off after 45 seconds of uninterrupted speaking. Anyone can begin.
Yeah, so when it comes to these events, they're really important. They generate a lot of buzz, but they also generate a lot of national pride, which is great if it's done in a healthy way, but not everyone's supporting the same team when it comes to these events. And so if we're going to do something that's related to the Olympics or to FIFA World Cup or to something that requires international competition, we have to be mindful that we're ensuring that students who may not be supporting the team like Canada still feel like they have a space that they can come into and participate in those activities. So it's about, again, talking about accessibility. In terms of our events, we want to make sure that people feel comfortable coming into these events.
Sure. So to that, next year obviously there won't be an Olympics when one of us is in office, but I wonder why we didn't have something like Olympics or something where it was department against department, or faculty versus faculty, society versus society, something like that. It doesn't all have to be athletics. Not everybody's athletic, so it would be silly to assume that. But putting together low key events with different kind of areas of interest that everybody can participate in, and set up some kind of a prize at the end would be a great way to kind of just work off the buzz of an event like this.
All right, if there's no other discussion, then we'll move on to the next question. So this next question, there's not going to be any open discussion, and you'll understand why once I ask these questions. So starting with Corey, if you could be an animal, what would you be?
I love that this. I'm glad that we're taking time to have a little light fun. The elections can be quite an intense period of time, so it's nice when we get some nice little one-answer questions like this. I think if I could be an animal, I would definitely choose to be a lion. Many folks know I'm very dedicated to astrology, and my star sign is Leo. So of course, I see myself very much represented in that.
All right, thank you there, Corey. Now, Tori, if you could be an animal, what would you be and why?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to recognize that we're all animals here at Dal. We're all Dal tigers. So I think we should all be proud that we represent one right there. But if I could be any animal, I think I'd want to be an elephant. Why exactly? Well, elephants always remember, and they're solely based around community and family and sticking together, as well. Yeah, as well as being like the gentle giants, I guess, of the jungle. So
All right, thank you there, Tori. Uh, Irene, same question. If you could be an animal, what would you be and why?
So mine, I don't know how many people will know it. It's a tarsier. So it is a monkey found in the Philippines that is the smallest monkey in the world. So yeah, it's I have a magnet and it's the exact same size as the magnet. So of course I recognize, but I associate myself with that. But at the same time, it is known for being very agile, very independent, and very capable of itself. So even though it's small, it's very able. It you can't. It has its own abilities that are uncontrollable. So heyo.
All right,
That
thank you,
one.
Irene.
On that note.
And Devin, if you could be an animal, what would you be and why?
Well, I don't think I'd be an elephant because I don't need to be any bigger. That's for sure. I think I would be a pit bull. Oh, hey. Because they're just misunderstood creatures. Not that I feel misunderstood, but I think that it would give me as a pit bull a chance to help other pit bulls of the world be better understood by the general population, even though I wouldn't be allowed to go to Montreal.
All right, thank you, candidates.
Discussion on that?
we can't have a discussion on that.
I will give you 2 minutes to discuss if you really so want.
I have a question for one of my fellow candidates.
Can we allow that for this discussion?
You can submit it to the moderator, and the moderator may.
Moderator, can you please ask my fellow candidate if that candidate were an elephant, what it would do about the mouse problem in the library?
I guess good question. I'd take my friendly mouses and escort them somewhere where they could better be mice.
Elephants are afraid of mice, though. It's
I
like
know,
a thing.
but like
Fight
I'd
your
be an elephant that's not afraid of anything.
Big part of this
I'd
job
try
is
Like the
anyways.
Jungle Book. Like the Jungle Book.
Exactly. I even got elephant earrings on right now.
There we go.
I was just gonna say a big part of this job a lot of the time is facing your fears, so being able to come up against that kind of
Fight the
kind of
mice.
stuff is important, and being willing to do that.
Okay. Thank you, candidates. Again, another question of a similar nature. There is someone that is very interested in the answer to this question. That's what I have right here. So, Tori, what is your favorite color and why?
Ooh. Honestly, I think that's the hardest question I've ever had to answer in my whole life. I think, like, me personally, my favorite color is purple. It was my color that was given to me when I started at my school in grade 7. Each grade had a color, and mine was purple. And from then on, I've loved purple ever since. Do I wear a lot of purple? Never. But I don't know, it's just my favorite color. But I mean, I don't discriminate to other colors of the rainbow, and I love them all.
Thank you, Tori. Irene, same question. What is your favorite color? Why?
So one of my favorite parts about making this campaign is that I could spew my favorite color everywhere. So that's why my posters, my everything is orange, because I love the vibrancy. I love everything that's about it. And another thing that I'm gonna go a little bit religious. My church does orange because like red is love and yellow is family, and then together it makes orange. So that's a cute thing about me.
All right, thank you, Irene. Devin, what is your favorite color? Why?
Well, I'm going to utilize my time to answer this question to give a brief history of my favorite colors. When I was young, I liked red. I think it was because it was just really kind of vibrant and there, and I ran around a lot. And then I must have mellowed out because I really liked the color blue. And now, there must have been some kind of meeting in the middle because I really like purple. And similar to another one of my fellow candidates, I don't wear any of it. It's not a me color. just the way it goes. I find myself wearing lots of grays, and that's probably because I feel deprived or something. But purple's not a me color, but it's my favorite one.
All right. Thank you, Devin. And Corey, what is your favorite color? Why?
I am shocked and ashamed that none of you said gold. Right now. That's not my favorite color, but my favorite color, much like Devin, when I was young, I used to really be into the color red because I was obsessed with firemen and fire trucks. I went as a fireman for Halloween one year. Well, anyway, but now it has definitely changed to blue, and not like a sky blue, but more like a deep sort of blue, sort of like that gentleman's right there. Yeah, that shirt right there.
It's a nice shirt.
That's a nice one.
All right, thank you, candidates. As with the other question, you get 2 minutes of discussion if you so wish.
So have you considered converting over to purple? Like you had the same kind of flux.
You know,
Converting
purple
people
actually at
now.
one point was my favorite color. And
Okay.
then, it sort of shifted a little bit. It was, it was too out there for
It was
me.
still
I wanted
it was
to
still
come
too
back.
red for you.
And, yeah, there was too much.
Well, like,
red.
I
Candidates,
think-
please stay civil and address the moderator.
I think it's important to recognize that your favorite color is like an essence of who you are and does not need to be represented in your clothing choices every day. So much like Devin said, he prefers to wear, or he wears a lot of grays. I wear a lot of blacks and darker tones. But again, on the inside, I'm always wearing purple.
But all colors are wonderful.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting too is that colors are kind of inherently tied to emotions for me. You know, Irene mentioned something about red being love. Red for me is tied to anger, which is interesting. And purple's kind of tied to like a somber mood, almost bitterness. So it's interesting that that we can be so upbeat,
Purple does not represent
and still
bitterness.
have purple as our favorite color.
I don't think a purple is bitter. I do agree with its mellow tones, but I'd say like it's a happier mellow tone, like closer to how you'd feel with a pink, rather than like a sad blue.
You're entitled to that opinion.
Okay, thank you, candidates. That was a couple fun questions. Just for the record, my favorite color is red. My favorite animal is a wolf. Now let's continue. So this will be for Irene.
Is there discussion or?
No, this is a new question. And this one will be a genuine question.
All questions
The
are
others are
genuine.
very genuine as well.
My apologies. How will you, in your position, create more of a community on and off campus, keeping in mind that Dalhousie and DSU have many unique voices and communities?
Absolutely. So, of course, the first thing when it comes to addressing that would be outreach to off-campus students. And of course, that outreach, it's not the same for everyone. It could be an email, it could be a text, it could be me going there. What I really want to do would be me going there and speaking directly to those groups and seeing where do you need help in your assistance with making event programming, with doing that sort of facilitating, and also using inclusive language, because when you talk to off-campus students, they could be also a mature student, they could be a grad student, they could be a first-year student that isn't actually in residence. And those inclusive languages will help break the barriers that sometimes when they don't know what's happening on campus, it will help them know what's going on campus more. So.
Thank you. Devin, same question. How will you in your position create more of a community on and off campus, keeping in mind that Dalhousie and DSU have many unique voices and communities?
I think that I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one time?
Yes.
Thank you.
How will you in your position create more of a community on and off campus, keeping in mind that Dalhousie and DSU have many unique voices and communities?
So one thing to remember is that community is not, necessarily tied to culture or race or gender identity. It can be tied to interest. It can be tied to anything. So I think, once again, the big conversation tonight is about communication and it's about conversation. And I think that's important. Letting people know what's going on campus to help them further their own interests, expand the things they're already interested in, and marketing events to possibly groups that we wouldn't normally market those events to. And I think the off-campus is definitely a challenge, but I think if you bring people to something on campus and they're really into it and they really find something unique that they like in it, then they're going to take it away with them.
Thank you. Corey, same question. How will you in your position create more of a community on and off campus, keeping in mind that Dalhousie and DSU have many unique voices and communities?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to creating communities, we also have to recognize that while we want to create a general community of Dalhousie students, we should also be highlighting specific communities as well. And like Devin said, that's not just about a culture, that's not just about a race. It comes down to interests and different hobbies and habits, and also recognizing that there are a lot of spaces already on campus that are centers for different communities, and it's about building on those and making sure that students know how to access them and get to them. But more importantly, it's also about understanding that it doesn't always have to be a one campus vibe. We can recognize that Sexton students have different needs and different priorities, and that their community is going to be different from the community that we hold up here on Studley. And recognizing that and working with that and working to build on that. A lot of what I touch on as well, going a bit more general, is looking to the community and recognizing that there are so many fantastic organizations in the HRM and connecting students with those so that we can continue to build this sort of outlook
Thank you.
from doubt.
Sorry about that.
No.
So now, Tori, same question. How will you in your position create more of a community on and off campus, keeping in mind that Dalhousie and DSU have many unique voices and communities?
So I have two kind of parts to this question. One thing I really want to do in my role as VP Student Life would be opening the dialogue between VP Student Life and societies and kind of creating an open forum where all societies or like society representatives can come together and discuss what each individual society and community is doing on campus and how they might be able to collaborate with other students who they may never interact with throughout their university experience to create events that we can all be a part of. And the second point to this is, as VP Student Life, creating safe and inclusive community events surrounding stuff like back to school, not necessarily O Week, but back to school for everyone, athletics, DAL 200 anniversary, like in the fall, homecoming, making safe and inclusive events for all students that would maybe defer students from partaking in other unsafe activity alternatives. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to move directly to the next question because it directly involves this question we just asked, and then you guys will have some time to discuss to save to get time for more questions to be asked. So, Devin, in the same vein as the last question, how do you plan to increase off-campus engagement throughout your events in your position?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the challenges that I've been considering. I think, as we were talking about building communities on campus is important. I think that first of all, organizing off-campus events at places that students want to go to is important, and that they will continue to kind of take the communities that they've made here somewhere else. One example is the Boardroom Game Cafe on Barrington Street. It's a cool place that I super love, and they're super inclusive. Just a quick plug there. But yeah, I think that's one way to kind of move the DAO community of DAO students off campus, take it somewhere that they can bring students in if they've got friends at NSCC or things like that, or NSCAD. That they'll bring people in and they'll make them a part of kind of the bigger DAO family away from here.
Thank you. Corey, same question. In the same vein as the last question, how do you plan to increase off-campus engagement throughout your events and your position?
Yeah, so I think what we really need, if we want off-campus students to participate in our events and programming, we need to make sure that we're focusing on key events throughout the year that we can build on and do year after year after year, so that we start to build an audience and we start to build that expectation that those events are happening and everyone will already know that they're a good time. DALFest has been spanning for 10 years now, and the audience that it had at the very beginning is nothing compared to the audience that we saw this past year. That's because students have come to expect a certain level of being good, for lack of a better word, on the top of my head. And so it's really about building on those culture of those big events that we do year after year. It's about making sure that Snow Week becomes more and more of a highlight to students, that we're continuing our success with Orientation Week, with DALFest, with the Society Expo, with other such events, and making DAL a place that students want to come, but also engaging with other organizations off campus, as my fellow candidates have said, and making sure that we're making those connections. DAL doesn't have the privilege like a lot of other universities, it's in the middle of a city, and we really need to focus more on how we can engage students when they're off campus and remind them that they are a Dalhousie.
Thank you. Tori, same question in the same vein as the last question. How do you plan to increase off-campus engagement throughout your events and your position?
Again, I kind of have two parts to this. So one is recognizing that all off-campus students live in different parts of Halifax. So like I myself live close to Studley campus because all my classes are here, whereas engineers, they might live close to Sexton campus. So if we are throwing events, it's thinking about those locations, so spreading the wealth across all the campuses that we have. So some students may not always have to trek so far away from home to come to events. And then the second part of this is partnering with local Halifax businesses. So if we want to throw events within the community, that we can maybe subsidize them for students, but as well as just showcasing Halifax's hidden gems to the students, so they so they not only feel a part of the Dalhousie community, but also the Halifax community as a whole. And I think that's really important, is to recognize we don't just live at Dal, we live in Halifax. Thanks.
Thank you, Tori. And Irene, same question. In the same vein as the last question, how do you plan to increase off-campus engagement throughout your events and your position?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dal 200 just passed. Community was a big thing with that. And off-campus students actually also was a big part of the volunteer hours that was part of the Dal 200, which made it also amazingly great. And the feeling of belonging that went with that community of off-campus students also had increased and made a great impact overall. So on that note, having more programming maybe off campus, have them have opportunities to grow and be an off-campus student and experience, as Tori and Em and everyone else has said, on off-campus, but maybe bring it back to on-campus on a smaller level, having an off-campus lounge. We had one, and maybe we can bring one back and have it facilitated, have it accessible for students. Having a fridge. If you're an off-campus student and you live off campus and you're here for the whole day, having a lunch that you don't have to buy at Pete's, that would be really great. And just having a simple fridge for off campus students would feel like you belong on campus as well.
Thank you. So candidates, you have 5 minutes to discuss that question and the one previous, just to give you a reminder of what it was. How will you in your position create more of a community on and off campus, keeping in mind that Dalhousie and DSU have many unique voices and communities? You have 5 minutes, 45 seconds max of uninterrupted time.
So I like the idea that we're working with two senses of off-campus community right now. We're working with the idea that off-campus students who don't live in res, which is a community that I would identify with. That's one idea, but also just people in the wider Halifax area, right? And so, for example, the Tea Room is a downtown Halifax bar and music venue as much as anything else down there, and we should be using it that way. So, booking bands and artists in there that are free for Dal students, but then having the general public come and pay a small ticket price, smaller than you would get anywhere else in town, and come and see the same acts would be great. It's a great way to diversify the community that we're bringing in, and also making a little bit of money back. For us, I think is a really good idea.
Yes, something that Dal kind of struggles, focusing on the bar because the Tea Room was mentioned, is having the Greywood and the Tea Room be competitive with bars across Halifax. I mean, we live in a city that has one of the most bars per capita in Canada. So how do we remain, competitive? And a lot of what this job is advocating to ensure that we're able to stay, and bringing people into these spaces. I think the renovations did a great job for the Greywood. What is going on in the Tea Room? How can we better that space so that it is more accessible to students? We've heard from the Engineering Society. They say that there needs to be a drastic change in the Tea Room so that it is more of a place that people want to go and be at, and that's important for creating communities, is building on those spaces that we have and ensuring that we're inviting people in and staying competitive. Dal is right in the middle of Halifax.
45 seconds.
Well, I would love to ask what's going on in the Tea Room. I would love to ask one of my fellow candidates who is the incumbent VP Student Life, what is going on in the Tea Room? What programming have we done down there this year?
Yeah, I guess to respond to that, the Tea Room is open 2 nights a week on Thursdays and Fridays. Fridays being its most popular with its reoccurring trivia night, which packs the room. We've attempted to do programming outside of those 2 days with various degrees of success, working with the Engineering Society to try and bring more people into that space. But there seems to be this disconnect, is that we see these 2 nights as being pretty popular, especially that Friday again. And then when we try to mirror programming or do different programming than in the tea room, the attendance just isn't there. And when it comes to being financially responsible, we have to keep that in mind, that as much as we would like to continue to try and do more events down there, we have to be reasonable about our budget as well.
So when I was working as a booking agent, I worked with the DSU on an event at the tea room that we did market to the public. I think it was a $10 ticket for the public, and it was free or $5 for DAL students, and we packed the room. So I think that it's not just a matter of, oh, it's the tea room and we should, try our best. I think there is a way that we can do it, and it's a matter of communicating better with the general public on what's going on down there, and it's communicating better with our Sexton students and letting them know that this is happening.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we've actually done that quite a few times with a lot of the concerts that we bring in. They're not always free for DAL students, but there's usually a reduced price for DAL students, and then of course we accept general public into them as well. But actually in a few weeks' time, Craig Cardiff is going to be down there, and that's a free concert for DAL students with regular pricing going out. So I think that is a viable option that we can choose, but it's one that we're choosing, and yet we're still seeing a low turnout, and we need to be financially responsible at some point.
I love Craig. That's what I used to work for.
Yeah.
If I can just bring it back to creating a Dalhousie community as a
Sorry.
whole, I think it's really important to recognize that we have students across 4 campuses, and oftentimes we forget about Truro students. And I'd really love to see some initiatives we put in place to bring Halifax students up to Truro so they can experience what campus is like up there, or again, bring Truro students to Halifax. Because again, if we want to create a Dalhousie community that we all feel a part of, we have to remember that our students don't just exist on Studley or Sexton, but they also exist on Carleton, and they also exist in Truro as well.
And then continuing on that, when we have programming for off-campus students, it's finding out what their needs. So obviously, like I said before, they could be first-year students. They could be also mature students with families and had experiences that are above that I have had. So is it childcare? Is it more knowledge on what we have to offer for first-year students? What have you, to have those opportunities to have that impactful programming for those individual off-campus students? That's where we could see the best turnout. And actually, I went to Sexton campus and asked them what kind of things you want to see on Sexton campus to make an impact, to make a difference. And they said mental health of their students is a big priority to them. And I want to bring those mental health services that we have here on campus and emphasize it, so that not just on Sexton, obviously, but on all campuses that we have, Truro, Carleton, Studley, and emphasize that importance that take care of yourself and love yourself.
All right, candidates, that was 5 minutes. So we're now at the top of our second hour of debate, so we are going to take a short break, and then we will be back. Again, if you have any questions, please submit them to Kat here at the front of the room. We will do our best to get to them. Thank you very much.
What was the question?
I believe it was,
Community one?
yeah. I think I said that. Okay, so then it'll be Corey's turn. All right, Corey, this one is similar to the last two, but it is important. How do you plan on incorporating the agricultural campus in student life, both in terms of O-week or regular engagement? If you aren't sure, how do you plan on learning about how to best incorporate them and learning about their needs?
Yeah, so I think this speaks back to my idea that we want to provide as one campus vibe as we can, but we also need to recognize that different campuses presents different needs, especially agricultural campus being so much further away from Studley, Carleton, and Sexton. When it comes to engaging agricultural students, something that I want to sort of resurrect is having it so that we can bring those students down to some of our more major events like Dalfest, Snow Week, and anything else big, TEDx, and any of those other larger events that we plan. This is something that my predecessor did. Not really something I picked up too much, but it's something that I'm committed to doing this time around, if reelected. And just, we want to open lines of communication between their governing body, DASA, and the DSU, make sure that we're engaging regularly with the DSU counselor that represents agriculture, and ensure that, again, we're listening to their needs and we're attempting to advocate for them because they are so separate from us, but the decisions that are made within the university's faculty and administration do affect them.
Thank you. Tori, same question. How do you plan on incorporating the agricultural campus in student life, both in terms of O-week or regular engagement? And if you aren't sure, how do you plan on learning about how to best incorporate them and learning about their needs?
Yeah, so I have a couple ideas about this. And just to start off, like if I was elected, I do want to spend more time on Truro, make myself known who I am on Truro as VP Student Life, because again, they are students of the union, they do pay, and we should offer the same kind of support that we give students here in Truro. And one way to do so is working closer with DASA. So DASA has an orientation week programmer just like we do here. And one way to like better support them in planning this is I guess myself or the O-week coordinator going to Truro and helping with that. And then as well in terms of regular student life events, I want to bring Truro students to Dalhousie when we do have those big events like homecoming, like Dalfest, stuff like that. But as well recognizing the importance of students here going to Truro, and I'd love to send students to Truro for their big events to get to experience what campus is like there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene, same question. How do you plan on incorporating the agricultural campus in student life, both in terms of O-week or regular engagement? If you aren't sure, how do you plan on learning about how to best incorporate them and learn about their needs?
Absolutely. So the past Community Day 2.0, I was actually on the Truro campus and simply asked, what do you guys feel you miss between campuses? And they simply said shared resources. We have resources here that are so wonderful and great for the students that are here, and they feel that they either get the leftovers or they don't have them on their campus as well. So absolutely taking a step forward to sharing our resources with them. One thing that we did recently was sharing our tiger closet with them, which was a great success and absolutely showed the benefits and the impact of that on its own. But further, I would do the communication, and I would commute to Truro to find out the needs and where they see they lack in their programming, as well as using that same, as I've been saying, that inclusive language, so they're also on the same page as we are, so there's not that distant or that disconnect between communication, and have it be accessible. So if they need a shuttle bus, if they need transportation, having those things accessible for them.
Thank you. And Devin, how do you plan on incorporating the agricultural campus in student life, both in terms of O-week or regular engagement? If you aren't sure, how do you plan on learning about how to best incorporate them and learning about their needs?
Yeah, we talk about the agricultural campus as almost a second thought, and I think it's important to remember that they're actually far enough away that we can program the same, if not similar, similar if not the same events here as we do there without the events being redundant. So, for example, students at the agricultural campus going, oh, Studley got Black Panther screening, like I really want to see that, blah blah blah. It's still in theaters. Why? Why didn't we just show it over there? No problem to do that at all. As far as O-week goes and Dalfest, why not have a Dalfest that is Truro specific, or if we're bringing a musician in, why not look at like a block booking situation where we can actually pay them slightly less, but book them for more than one show and have them go to Truro first and then here, or vice versa. Get other schools in on the dates as well, possibly St. FX. So we're looking at things like that. Additionally, working to transport students here, I think, was a great idea that was brought up.
Thank you. So candidates, you got 5 minutes to discuss, 45 seconds to speak uninterrupted. You may begin whenever.
Yeah, I want to highlight something that one of my fellow candidates said about the idea of shared resources, which I think is absolutely important. That we're ensuring that the agricultural students are getting their share of what they feel they're deserved. But at the same time, we also want to work with them to ensure that we're not sharing those services are just there at agriculture. That we're setting them up so that they can have these services without relying on the DSU or ourselves, because we have to respect that they are an autonomous group up there. And there is enough distance where there is clear differences in how they go about and what sort of services they want. So while we can share our resources at first, what's important is ensuring that we're setting them up for success, and if that's a resource that they see is important, ensuring that we're setting them up so that they can take that on and provide that service to their students.
I think one thing as well is like setting up the infrastructure in Truro so they can be, I guess, a self-sufficient union, but also not necessarily shared resources, but support. Like as the student union and like as a VP Student Life, we can support DASA in the events that they want to throw on campus. So like being able to, I guess, share our knowledge and support students rather than necessarily kind of give them our hand-me-downs or like give them, I guess, share resources that they may not need, but just supporting students more on Truro and I guess showing them that to the DSU they're valuable members of this union.
And then building off that, I would say that when we go to communicate and we go to communicate with Truro, we would find these resources so that we're not wasting our time and we're not having waste resources. We're doing things that are vital for their community. And at the same time, when we're talking to the students, we're building that community that if they want to explore Dalhousie and Halifax more, or if our Halifax students want to go to Truro, that we make that possible and we make that opportunity available for our campuses. We can make an entire event out of it, an entire program to impact the students of this is all of all Dal campus and not just Halifax campus, Truro campus, but all is Dal.
And yeah, definitely related to what these guys are saying. Part of the question is about learning, and I don't know what resources the agricultural campus has, and so for me personally, that is a stepping stone that I would have to step on, I guess. But yeah, definitely working with DASA and finding out, what is it that they need, what is it that they want, what is it that they have, making sure there aren't any redundancies and nothing is overlooked.
All right, thank you, candidates. So we'll move on to the next question. So this one will be Tori first. So Tori, VP Student Life is traditionally seen as VP Fun and Events. How will you incorporate aspects of student life that fall outside of fun and events in your portfolio?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It does. A lot of our portfolio does seem like fun student life events, but we also have to recognize that student life does not only encompass events, but it encompasses everything that we need as students here at Dal. And a lot of this is student wellness. So sharing those resources like safety services and sharing like health and safety services, mental health services that we do provide on campus better to students, making them more aware to students, educating students is on the different services that the DSU provides. Yeah, it's awesome to have fun, but like we can't all be hype every day. I don't feel like going to an event every single day. Sometimes I feel like I need like mental health support or just someone to talk to, and all those resources are available at the DSU. And I think it's really important in student life in kind of highlighting that aspect of it as well.
Thank you. Irene, same question.
Okay, so one of my main platform pieces is impactful programming. So I'm going to quickly break that down. Impactful programming, leaving someone a little bit better, a little bit different, making a mark, a statement, and then through programming, so activities, workshops, maybe an event, or something that they can feel they build through. So that it could be campus services, that could be upgrading and enhancing the DSU app. This could be improving engagement through community, through volunteer work, through mental health work, through support, finding support. This is all encompassing in impactful programming and leaving the student or having the student leave Dalhousie feeling that they left it a little bit better. And this is all encompassing under Dalhousie student life when we think about mental health, when we think about the security, the safety of students. Impactful programming can affect each and every part of that aspect.
Thank you. Devin, same question.
Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest part of our job as VP Student Life is to make students feel like they're at home. So that means fostering a community which is inclusive, which is safe, you know, which is fun. I think it's super important. But also, yeah, like, using the resources that we have to make sure that students aren't feeling left out. They're making sure that, they have somewhere to go, whether it's a space that we're creating or it's directly to us to say, this is an issue that I'm having. I really need to speak with someone about it. Or, there was an event that I went to that I didn't feel like went the way I wanted it to, or I didn't get the experience from it that I wanted to get. And so just being a sounding board for those students is important, and definitely not always part of the fun mandate.
Thank you. And Corey, same question.
Yeah, so a large part of this portfolio does revolve around events and programming, but there are other crucial points to it as well. Student wellness is a major factor. So as VPSL, you sort of have control over the wellness room in the DSU, which is a new initiative that's been started and has been started to build a baseline foundation of different wellness services that we can provide. Again, we've just hired, or my office has just hired a new commissioner to look at the wellness strategies and try to do comparisons across different unions and build a strategy moving forward so that we have tangible goals to reach. And it's also, this position is unique in the sense that it has one of the widest scope. Student life is such a broad topic. One year you might be focused on mental health or wellness, and then the next year you're over and you're talking more about food and food security and initiatives like that on campus. I mean, it varies so much year to year. It really comes down to the person and what they want to see. And it's sometimes you advocate for things that you didn't anticipate needing to advocate for, but you do it because that's what's important to students. And so it's really about engaging with that fact and trying to.
Thank you. So candidates, you now have 5 minutes to discuss. Again, 45 seconds for uninterrupted time. You may begin.
I'd love to ask what saying that the challenges that this position face change year to year. I'd love to know what the biggest challenges were this year specifically for the position.
Well, I guess to respond to that, there's one of the biggest challenges we face, and we continue to face as a union year after year, is participation from our students. We've made some big changes in terms of our communication department going forward. I feel like we have a really strong communication strategy when it comes to our social media output, our content that we're producing. But what I really want to focus on is how do we bring students into the union? We have information going out, but there seems to be this halt somewhere where it's only getting to certain people. So we need more tangible ways to bring people into this union so that information can flow more easily. This comes through more paid student commissioner positions. This comes through more open committees. This comes through more volunteer opportunities that are actively drawing students in so that we can get that information back out and make new connections. A big challenge for us this year has been sort of dealing with, grad student issues, for example. DAGS has had some issues with the music.
That's 45.
So I guess building off my point that I stated earlier, having volunteer opportunities, because currently right now the DSU doesn't have volunteer opportunities specifically for the Dalhousie Student Union. We have amazing students who want to volunteer, but they don't know how directly to volunteer with their student union. They have commissioner positions, but I don't want to have commissioner positions where they work hundreds of hours and then just get paid $500. I want a sustainable living, a living wage where they actually per hour that they can live off of. That's a step forward that I would make.
One thing we have in terms of programming and events right now is like somewhat of an infrastructure set up so that events are run pretty similarly year after year, and whether or not it's the exact same event, it's kind of the same infrastructure put in place. So as VPSL, I'd love to see an infrastructure put in place surrounding student well-being. So even though the person holding the role might change year after year, there's practices in place that we can kind of repeat to ensure that student well-being and like mental health is just as much a focus as having fun and enjoying the community that we live in.
I think that one thing that was brought up was the idea of paid commissioner positions and open committees. I don't think that the Office of VP Student Life needs more people to manage. I think that, for example, 1 or 2 concentrated social media manager positions would be extremely beneficial. To really have someone who's dedicated to the promotion of events and the promotion of DSU goings on, and getting a specific marketing plan. Like, what are we doing 1 month out for this? What are we doing 2 weeks out for this? What are we doing the week of, 2 days before, and the day of the event to ensure success? I think that those kinds of things are definitely what we should be looking at, but not larger committees.
I guess just building off that, I'll say that a lot of our social media output is done through the communications office and not through the VPSL. So the VPI and the communications director work to create a strategy and work with the VPSL when it comes to promoting events. But when I'm talking about student commissioner positions, what I mean, you may think that the student life vice president doesn't need more to manage, but in fact, what we've actually seen and what I've noticed is that a lot of the work is put on the vice president's student life to provide a lot of the programming events. So there's a lot of on the ground work that takes up a lot of the vice president's the VPSL's day-to-day time. By creating more of these positions, we create more of a balanced workflow so that we're giving meaningful employment opportunities to students, but we're seeing a decrease on the workload on the VP student life, giving them opportunities to focus more on how they can build on the sustainability of the position of the union, how they can put in place services, programming, and events that are gonna be lasting longer, rather than just focusing on the day-to-day basis of the job.
Yeah,
And
by
then,
no, you go.
okay. Thank you. So, and then another part building off that, right now, what I kind of see as a trend is numbers. We're really big on how many students go to events and how well attended it is. But what about the impact that each of a student gets from the event, from community day, from Del Lead, from Impact Awards itself? Having the student come out of there and feel empowered, feel encouraged, and that could possibly trail on and trickle down to being them wanting to come back again, them encouraging their friends, saying, hey, I got this out of it. It was so empowering. It was so amazing. It impacted me, and it'll impact you as well. Come to this event. Or even if it's not hooray, hurrah, it could easily be a workshop that maybe 50 students do over a certain period of time, that we impact those 50 students, and the amount of like the I don't know, have a better word to say it, essence that we can get from impacting those 50 students, we can get in the end.
Tori, I'll give you 45 seconds and then we'll move on.
Thanks. Yeah, I think one thing that was mentioned that I think is really important is remembering that growing student life committee or having an open forum with societies and having more paid commissioner positions is not necessarily about managing people, but it's how can we use our students better and the resources that they already have to kind of take the heat off the VPSL. Like, yes, it's our job to ensure student life programming is going on, but it's not my job to ensure that every single one has to be planned by me. It's to ensure that like students are involved planning events that they want and think that they're interested in, and that's how we kind of keep that student well-being going and that mental health on campus, creating events where you can go to relax and chill out from life.
All right, thank you, candidates. So we will move on to the next question. So this would be for Irene. So the issue of declining student involvement and attendance has been described earlier. What do you believe to be the issue or reasons behind declining involvement and attendance?
Well, I feel like that's not just a single issue. I feel like that's an all over issue. Like it's student life. We're on a base level, honesty, students are all busy. We have midterms, they have labs, they have tutorials. Just getting them to work around and realizing and acknowledging their time is valuable. Their time coming out is valuable. So acknowledging that first baseline, and then acknowledging where in the school year is there less participation, and possibly working around that schedule and finding programming that works better. Is it maybe helping them have more midterm prep instead of having a really big event? Is it having them relax with a movie screening instead of having a big time event? Or during those times where they're more relaxed, maybe that's where we input our planning. But obviously communicating with the students and finding out what they want first would be the first step in moving forward.
Thank you. Devin, same question.
Could you just read it one more time?
Yes. What are your, the issue of declining student involvement and attendance has been discussed earlier. What do you believe is to be the issue or reasons behind declining involvement and attendance?
So I think Irene's answer was excellent. I think that as I'm going around and talking to people and I'm asking, what kind of events have you been to that you thought worked or what didn't work? They're saying, I haven't been to any. Well, what year are you in? Oh, I'm in 4th year. Well, why not? Well, I don't care. And so I think that student apathy is a huge issue. and I need to figure out, we all need to figure out why it's a huge issue. But then, of course, just letting people know what's going on. I mentioned having, possibly a social media manager position, and implementing specific event marketing timelines. Like, again, 1 month out, 2 weeks out, week of, 2 days before, and the day of the event. I think are super important, and finding out what different avenues we can use to market it, not just social media.
Thank you. Corey, same question.
Can you repeat it?
Yes. The issue of declining student involvement and attendance has been discussed earlier. What do you believe is to be the issue or reasons behind declining involvement and attendance?
Yeah, I think like my fellow candidates, we recognize that it's not just a single issue. This is something that has been stumping VPSLs for the past couple of years. Is how do we get past that DALFest momentum loss that we seem to have each year, and how do we engage students and keep them engaged? And different VPSLs have attempted to try different things, and I think that's what it comes down to, is that you have to be willing to go against what maybe other folks have done in previous years and do new events and bring it to new locations and try different things, to try and figure out where exactly your audience is and how can you use that. It is about respecting students' time, and it's about finding out what events are of interest to those students. So one of our best well-attended events was a panel on toxic masculinity, which is something that I don't think anyone would have ever thought that this would be a hugely attended event, but it was. And so using that, we sort of use that knowledge to sort of go, okay, this panel was really successful. Maybe we need to focus more on doing more panels about these sorts of topics. So it does change from year to year, but I think there are ways to sort of work around it.
Thank you. And Tori, same question.
Can you repeat it?
Yes. The issue of declining student involvement and attendance has been discussed earlier. What do you believe to be the issue or reasons behind declining involvement and attendance?
Yeah, again, there's probably countless of reasons, but I think one of the major reasons that we have to think about is awareness and like how we promote these events to students. Like, for example, I love the band Colorado, and I didn't even know they came to campus this year until after the event had already happened, which like I was really disappointed about. And again, like as a fifth year student, that makes me sad because I'd like to think that I'm aware of what's going on campus. And honestly, one of those things is bringing it back to like student involvement in planning the events. I feel like students are more inclined to go when they've had a hand in kind of creating it, and that motivates them and their other friends to come. And one way of awareness that I think a new strategy that I have is putting a calendar permanently in the sub on the main floor as well as in the alumni lounge and on Carlton to kind of advertise events going on through the month and showcase those to students so they don't miss out on events that are going on.
Thank you, candidates. So we're having a lot of questions pour in, so I'm going to limit debate time or discussion time to 3 minutes instead of 5, just so we can get to all these questions. So it's 3 minutes now. You may begin.
Okay,
So
thank you. May I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate the example of that, the concert that was brought up. I think that what's really important is that we are not booking events last minute, and if we can't get a date for something that we want, we don't do it, because I think it's a waste of money to bring in a band like Colorado, and have the event not go as well, or have people not have as many people know about it as should know about it. And so I think that's absolutely a huge point. Thank you.
What's also important is, again, looking back at that idea that we need to build on the culture of some of our events and build on creating those events to be sustainable and to reoccur every year and have them become something that DAL students look forward to. Again, looking at DALFest, when it started, it probably wasn't that great of an event, but now look at where it is, where we have thousands of students pour into this concert, and it goes beyond just concerts as well. We need to be looking at, are we doing a good enough job in creating a sustainable approach when we think about our conferences, when we think about reoccurring events. We really want to play on that idea that we want to be building up the audience for this so that it can build on its success. And while Snow Week might not have had the biggest turnout, I can definitely say like we've done a lot to try and improve the structure of it, to try and improve how we communicate about it, and about what sort of events we're doing during that time.
That's time for 45 seconds. You still have a minute and a half.
Okay. And then, so building off my point, I also have the plan of finding new incentives. As I said before, talking to first year students and second year students about what incentivize them to go to events and building off that, looking towards the new generations that's coming in, but also like communicating with older generations to see what incentivizes them to go to an event, and then creating an event that actually interests them. With Dell After Dark, mature students were very much interested in hikes, not so much with first year students. Let's use that knowledge and go forward. On another point, we currently have already 2 calendars, a student life calendar and an academic calendar, both digital, not as well used. So part of my platform plan is having those services that are very much accessible to be more aware to students that they can use them and they can be aware that they're around on campus, so we don't have to have staff update a whole other calendar.
I think it's really important to kind of going off that is recognizing like when exams are planned in the schedule, recognizing when students are really heavily pressured with school, to figure out how we can create events to kind of take their mind off that. And then when there's little dips, figuring out how to create events that like bring more of a community and a spirit back to students. Because yeah, academics are extremely important, but it's also about like that other side of student life, where you live, how you want to interact with your community. And I think it's super important to recognize those things, and then from there figure out better ways to raise awareness so we can have greater turnout at events.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next question. I believe this is your turn, Devin, to go first. What are your thoughts on holding closed spaces for certain student populations, such as closed space for racialized students, to provide a safe space for marginalized and silenced communities?
I think it's an excellent idea. I think that, yeah, it's definitely something that we could make people more aware of, that these things are happening, that we are hosting. I also think, it's a bit of a problem that we have to have them. If we were having the kind of inclusive and diverse campus and, ability of freedom of expression that we want to have, we wouldn't need these closed spaces. But because we are in the kind of climate that we're in, I think they're absolutely important.
Thank you. Corey, same question.
Yeah, so I think it's been clear recently that these spaces are required now more than ever. There's been a lot of race tensions on this campus. There's no point in trying to deny it, and then a lot of tensions between different communities. I think these are important spaces that we create, but also recognize that also exist on this campus, and we build off of those. The Black and Indigenous Advising Center, the Indigenous Multi-Faith Center, different spaces and groups that are specific for these marginalized students who may not be feeling safe. It's about promoting the fact and building on this idea that these spaces do exist, but we need to be doing more to make sure that they're accessible to these students and these student groups.
Thank you. Tori, same question.
Here, people ask me.
Of course. What are your thoughts on holding closed space events for certain student populations, such as closed space for racialized students, to promote a safer space for marginalized and silenced communities?
Yeah, having worked with Dal Security for the past 2 years, I recognize that safety is a major concern for a lot of people on campus. I'd like to use a different word than closed, maybe rather safe space. Closed sounds, I don't know, kind of definitive and very, I guess, separate. But I'd like to see a safe space for everyone to be able to go on campus. And like Corey said, the multi-faith center, the international center, like everyone has, even faculty centers, there's different places on campus where students can go. And it's really important that anyone, if they're feeling marginalized, has a safe space where they can go, because it's a reality, campus isn't always safe for everyone, and we need to ensure that people do feel like there's always somewhere they can go and someone who they can talk to where they feel free to be exactly who they are. Thanks.
Thank you. And Irene, same question.
All right. Yes, I do believe that we should have those closed spaces. Just recently, we had Sister to Sister is a service that is a closed group service that is given. And recently in Community Day 2.0, that service was featured as an option that people can go and volunteer in. And one of the things that was said from one of those volunteers is that they feel so satisfied and so grateful that there is a place where they can feel connected to people that also look like them. And that is something that we need to continue to give and continue to recognize that that is a priority here on campus. And it's also like they have someone to relate to based on their experience. That's also another thing. If they're new to campus, that's also something that we have to recognize that is very much needed, and sometimes can be very scary to walk into a new place. But at the same time, I believe that we should have a follow-up place that is an open space to recognize. Like we had just recently a Black Excellence event, which recognized the networking event of the Black Excellence that we have on campus, and have more of this kind of event that we can open and acknowledge the excellence of all.
Thank you. All right, candidates. So you'll have 3 minutes to discuss this topic, and then we'll move on to new questions. You may begin.
So for the closed spaces, I completely believe that this time that they share with each other is something that is like it's something that bonds them and makes them feel like we went back to a previous question, like they feel like they have a community, and to connect that community back to Dalhousie, I feel it's very essential because that also brings that feeling of safety and it feels that feeling of belonging. Which is why I feel like we should continue these closed spaces, but also open up to opportunities where we take those small spaces and we take the conversation that happens in those small spaces and we build it to opening it up to people and saying, hey, this is our diversity, let's build inclusion with this knowledge that we have and with this knowledge that we share. This could be in the form of a workshop over the course of the semester through sister to sister, maybe a partnership, and then going off from there and learning from each other's experiences.
I just want to point out I don't like the language of they that's being used. It's we. We're all Dal students. I'm not a racialized or marginalized student, but I am a part of the Dal community, and they are a part of the Dal community. And I don't like the language that's being put forward here. I think closed spaces should be for anyone who needs them, anyone who wants to go somewhere and feel safe, and it's not a they thing.
It's also important to remember that safety looks different from individual to individual. So what might be comfortable and safe for one person isn't going to be the same for someone else. Mm-hmm. And so we need to recognize that that exists when we're talking about these closed spaces for students, and recognizing that there are needs and that we need to be collaborating with these groups of students in order to meet what they deem as being a safe and comfortable space, and making sure that we're providing and building on that and creating, ensuring that we're not just listening and nodding and then doing it once and then letting it go and then next year coming back and saying, oh yeah, we should do that again. It's about building on those relationships. It's about building on promoting those spaces and actively trying to make them better.
Thank you.
Again, with 20,000 students, not everyone is going to feel safe at the exact same time. So it's about working, again, with those organizations that exist on campus and those societies that represent marginalized groups on campus, working with them to create, like Corey said, the exact, like the space that they need. And what may feel like a safe space for me is going to look different for someone else. So it's important to recognize those differences and find a way to, with all those differences, ensure that there is still a safe space for everyone in the community.
All right. So we'll move on to another question. So this will start with Corey, I believe, is the next one. Looking at specifics, what Dal Society would you like to collaborate with on an event, and what might that look like?
Oh, great question. So this year we had an opportunity to partner with the Dal Theater Society to do a Rocky Horror show in the McGinnis Room, which saw a fantastic turnout of over 400 people, which was amazing for both the DSU and the society. So moving forward, there's not, I don't think, one specific society that I'm hoping to collaborate. I'm hoping to collaborate with as many different societies as I possibly can, because I think that a lot of people overlook the office of the Vice President of Student Life when it comes to planning their events. When there's a lot of information and a lot of institutional knowledge that this position holds and can help students bypass certain things and make sure that they're on the right track to creating events that are open to general student public and are enticing to the general student public. I guess if I had to pick one specific student society, I really like the work that the Dal Arts Outdoor Society has done this year. And I definitely think we could be doing more to engage students with, going beyond just the Halifax community and going out into the beautiful nature that Halifax or Nova Scotia has to offer. But yeah, I guess I just want to highlight the fact that it's not just about one society; it's about making sure that all our societies feel that they can come and speak with the Vice President Student Life
Thank
about
you.
events and programming.
Tori, same question.
Yeah, I don't know if I can actually pick just one. One thing I'd really like to do in the role of VP Student Life is create an open forum where all societies can come together. And if that's one representative, sending a representative from all societies, making it welcome to everyone, kind of hearing what societies are doing and seeing how I could collaborate with them or how they could collaborate with each other. Again, like I'm a commerce student, I would never interact with a science student on a day to day basis because we just don't have any classes together. But like if our societies can come together and like collaborate on events, that would be really cool to see. And I think like we lack kind of that connection between societies, even interest group societies like Harry Potter Society and Diving Society might not ever like know each other. But if there's a way where we can kind of get everyone from the community involved, that would be awesome.
Thank you. Irene, same question.
Absolutely. So, as everyone has stated, I don't think I can pick a single society that that I'm wholehearted. I want to work with all societies and maybe even have events that partner societies together. And then with the help of the Vice President of Student Life to make those events even more impactful, even more promising, even more attended as before, even like as their own. I feel like as Vice President of Student Life and just knowing myself personally, I would want to take on a challenge and maybe working with a society that's different from my realm. So I'm a management student, so maybe tackling, not saying that it would be out of my realm, but maybe a society that I wouldn't normally look to, and then see what they're doing and see what we can do to help. And that's not saying that I would ignore other societies, but I would also see a way that I could work with people that I don't normally would work with.
Thank you. And Devin, same question.
Yeah, this is I guess on a personal note for me. I'm a member of the Philosophy Society, the Undergrad Philosophy Society, and one thing that we do is we host monthly cafes where philosophy students will come and they'll present like a paper they've written, and that's something that I'd definitely like to see more of because the attendance has been hit and miss, and when people think philosophy, they think kind of like high-minded jargon. But really, a lot of these papers are dealing with real issues, real ethical issues, real social issues, and it's a good time to just come, have a couple brews, talk about some stuff, just have a good discussion. So working with the Philosophy Society on just kind of increasing attendance at the cafes is super important to me, just because I believe that they can really benefit more than just the philosophical community at Dell.
Thank you. Since that one was kind of more opinion based, we're just going to move right on to the next ones, and then we'll have a discussion on that one. So this would be Tori first. So what are your actions for preventing sexual and gender-based assault, violence, or harassment, and how will you support survivors on campus? This has been a major concern for folks living in res, but also extends all the way to the classroom.
Yeah, I think it's really important from the start that we kind of create a society in which we express that this kind of behavior is not okay. And there are a lot of services on campus that do provide training in anti-oppressive and like sexual assault behavior, as well as different services that will help those students who have been affected by this kind of behavior. For example, like I said, with Tiger Patrol, that we have a separate number that like students who are on safety plans, like they get first priority at Tiger Patrol to ensure that like their safety is met, as well as like the sexual assault center and the mental health workers of DMCRT. There's so many services on campus that we can combat this issue, and it's just about using those resources better than we are now.
Thank you. Irene, you're next.
Absolutely. So, you repeat the question?
Yes, of course.
Make sure that I'm articulating.
Mm-hmm. What are your action items for preventing sexual and gender-based assault, violence, or harassment, and how you support survivors on campus?
So one of my main platform pieces would be is campus services, and having them increase the awareness of it. And in that is increasing the awareness of the services that we have on campus, such as the anonymous phone line, such as mental health that was stated, and Tiger Patrol, and security, and having security make you feel safe, and that sort of thing. I actually had previously worked on the Gender-Based Violence Week. I created the posters for that, working with them. And from that, we also created a respect tour that we went from residence to residence talking to student leaders and having a baseline understanding of what respect is and how we can take gender-based violence and view it from first a point of respect and then going on and tackling the issue of gender-based violence, because all those issues start with how we respect people.
Thank you. Devin, same question.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to remember that we have to take a proactive instead of a reactive stance to this. Obviously, expanding the presence of existing facilities and services for survivors is definitely key. And talking to folks and letting them know that these facilities are there and these services are there. But things like educating people on what constitutes sexual harassment, what constitutes sexual violence, and taking a proactive stance on can we educate people better, and can we let people know that this education is happening on campus is absolutely important to eliminating and not just reacting to the problem.
Thank you. And Corey, same question.
Yeah, we believe survivors. That's the first thing, is installing that culture of the fact that the DSUs believe survivors. And again, I want to build sort of on Devin's idea of being proactive. He's absolutely right. The DSU recognized that this was an issue on campus, so we said, let's create a phone line to tackle this. We lost the phone line, so we came back and said, let's develop an entire center devoted to this program. And we absolutely did, and that's fantastic. And we need to continue to build on that and continue to create new resources in which we begin to try and challenge this culture of misogyny and sexual violence and toxic masculinity. It's important that we continue to do that. But it's also more about advocating to the university to tell them that this is an important issue and this is something that students are talking about. We need to institutionalize education around this issue because they're just not getting it outside of post-secondary. It's just not happening. We need to do more in order to, catch students when they're at this age, to begin to tell them about these issues and teach them about these issues, because our school systems just aren't doing it. And that's why we need to continue to build on places like the Survivor Support Center.
Okay. All right, so we only got time for one more question, and then we're going to go to closing statements. So I want to just make sure this question comes across, and then we'll do closing statements. So, Irene, this question is for you. First, do you think there should be more programming and support towards varsity students, varsity game attendance pride around our strong varsity teams?
Absolutely. I feel like there should be a lot more support on varsity athletes. One of my friends actually not recently, but in her lifetime, she had an experience as a varsity athlete, and she didn't feel, when she had her concussion and she wasn't able to be the varsity athlete that she didn't feel connected to the school. She didn't feel connected to being a varsity athlete. And when those things happen to varsity athletes, they don't feel like they have support. They don't feel like they have someone to back them up, to be like, hey, you're still a winner. You can still go. You can still do amazing things. Maybe not at an athletic point, but we still need to have that support, that mentality of thinking, even though you're not an athlete, you're still someone that can make an impact on your community.
Thank you. Devin, your turn.
Can you please read the question?
Of course. Do you think there should be more programming and support towards varsity students, varsity game attendance pride around our strong varsity teams?
Absolutely. I was speaking with one student who I think was a second year downstairs in the sub, and said, one of the things that they would love to see to help increase attendance at sporting events is increasing kind of the little events kind of in between, almost like a halftime, situation, which I think would be super cool to see. And I think, just playing to a field or an arena of people gives the teams an automatic boost, which is excellent. And so, of course, it goes back to communicating events like we've been saying all night long, promotion, and the marketing that that we've all discussed. But yeah, I think putting our sporting events and presenting them in a way that everyone can get something from them, and adding smaller events into them is a good way to raise interest.
Thank you. Corey, same question.
Yeah, I think we could always be doing more to support our varsity athletes and our athletes in general, in terms of providing more opportunities to showcase our teams and our DAL pride. Our athletics and varsity specifically gets a lot of support from the athletics department, but we can always be doing more to be in communication with them. like I said earlier, I think there's a lot of exciting and a lot of momentum that can be built around the fact of the new Dalplex that's opening up. That's going to open up whole new spaces, whole new accessible spaces to bring new groups of students into, the athletics world of Dal, because it is sort of centered around, that the Dalplex, the Wickwire, of course the gym down on Sexton. But when we're engaging with our varsity athletes, we need to make sure that we're also presenting equal opportunities for you. So we have one varsity team play at Oath, then we're presenting a new opportunity for another varsity team to be highlighted at a different event, and sort of and working with them to find out how best they can feel supported.
Thank you. And Tori, same question.
One more time. Yeah, I think athletics are a major part of our community here at Dal. And one thing that I kind of think there's a gap is between like varsity athletics and the DSU. And one way I kind of want to bridge that gap is as VPSL, like going to varsity council meetings, finding out their needs, or even like bringing in an athletics commissioner to have them sit and represent themselves on student life. And like I was a rower in a varsity, like a tier one, like varsity athlete at Dal, and I think one other thing is really important to recognize is like there's so much money put into varsity athletics that are paid for by the university, but I think it's also really important to showcase tier one and tier two athletics teams that may not have the same support from the university, and maybe on the student union side we can better support them in their athletics by like trying to get more awareness about their events as well. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so that's it for questions. So now we're going to do closing statements. Each candidate's going to get 1 minute to have a closing statement. And Devin, so we'll start with you.
Sure. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thanks to everyone who came and left early. Bigger thanks to everyone who stayed. I just hope that some of the things I said tonight rang true with some of you. My Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is DG4VP. And I hope that you decide to vote Devin Gorley. Thanks.
Thank you. Corey.
Yeah, again, I want to thank everyone for coming and everyone who stayed for the full 3 hours. And I really want to thank everyone who submitted a question. We had a wide range of different questions and topics. And we had a lot of important discussion on important issues that are facing students in their day-to-day lives right now. And again, something else I just want to highlight again is the importance of when holding on to institutional knowledge, and when you have someone who's experienced in this position and continuing on that experience and continuing to build strong foundation and a sustainable vice president student life office. I think my experience speaks to myself, and I've spoken a lot about it recently, but moving forward, if folks want something new, then that's what they want. But I think absolutely, if reelected, I think I could do a lot more this year, having the experience that I've already gained. Much like Devin, if you want to chat, feel free to reach out. I'm on Facebook, re-elect Corey Larson for VP Student Life 2018, or just send me a message. Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you. Tori.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to really say thanks to all those people who are invested in the elections. Like, I really hope and encourage all students to vote, because the DSU makes decisions about students, and everyone should have a voice in that. And yeah, I've spoke a lot tonight, and you can learn a lot about my platform through what I've said, but I really want to emphasize, I'm ready to use my 5 years of student life experience here at Dal, as well as the fresh ideas, having not currently worked in the DSU this year, bringing in my experience and fresh ideas to create the change that we want to see on campus and create a student life that we want to have here. And yeah, thanks so much for everyone coming. And again, Instagram, Snapchat, all that, you can reach out to me. Facebook is @Tori for VPSL. And same thing with my website. If not, find me on campus, and I'd love to talk to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. And Irene.
And as everyone has said, thank you so much for everyone who has stayed, who has watched the entire live broadcast, and who will watch the entire live broadcast. Thank you so much. I just want to reiterate my qualifications and why I believe It's not just through my work that I've experienced, it's also through my volunteer, it's through my passion. I've done this for 3 years, and it's not just because I was obligated to do student engagement for 3 years, it's because I fully heartedly wanted to do student engagement for my past 3 years. I feel like through the experience and the impact that I've made on campus, that will be shown through my campaign and how much that I care about the student union as well. Even though I'm young, I feel that my fresh knowledge and my different kind of perspective, even though I don't think 20 is young, but can come and show through on my platform. So as I've stated very many times, let's make it our DAO through impactful programming. If anyone wants to contact me, all my handles are Saliendra for Student Life. That's a long last name, I know. So SALIENDRA at Student Life. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So I want to thank all the candidates for coming out tonight. That was a long and productive debate. It was great. Yes, let's give them a hand. I also want to thank the DSU for allowing us to have the debate in here, as well as the people who are running tech back there. Thank you very much for allowing this to be broadcasted. I want to thank my fellow members of the Elections Committee and our CRO. And also to let you know that there will be a debate tomorrow at 5 p.m. for the president's position. It will be outside the gray, what's that? Sub atrium, so right outside the Greywood. So if you all want to tune into that tomorrow, that'll be great. I am your moderator, Mark Joycey. Everyone have a good night.